Let's start with Canada's participation to the war in Afghanistan. Canada has not razed cities to the ground in Afghanistan. Canada has not led to buildings crumbling onto families, women, and children. There is a way to wage war.
Afghanistan, first off, is nothing like Gaza. It was mostly rural, huge rural terrain. They did fight in certain cities, and those absolutely were razed. In fact, if I showed you a picture, you would think it's Gaza. Most of the fighting, especially with Canada's support, was rural, huge rural terrains and support. The second point, and why it makes no sense to compare it to Israel and Gaza, is because Israel is the sole fighter in Gaza.
JF's opening statement. Thank you very much for being with us. JF, the floor is all yours.
Hello, everyone, and I want to apologize in advance. My voice is weak tonight. I have a cough, but I've come because I always honor my commitment to come on Modern Day Debate, and I'll do my best to express my view. Israel's behavior. We will be talking about this tonight, but I'd like to frame first in purely theoretical term the issue that I take with Israel's behavior and why I think it can be labeled as a nation that is willing and doing wrong in the world. Let's put aside the question of Israel and Palestine for a moment, and let's talk about self-defense. If someone wanted to kill me, I would be entitled to defend myself in various ways, and most people would agree. Even if that person was on the point of truly killing me with a gun to my head, I would be entitled to potentially take lethal action against them to protect myself, to protect my life. And most people would agree with this. Self-defense is a thing. But there are things that self-defense does not justify. If I heard that someone is an assassin and wants to kill me and lives somewhere, say in Chicago, I couldn't decide all of a sudden I'm going to take a nuclear bomb and eradicate the whole of the city of Chicago, just in case this assassin gets out and kills me. Why is that wrong? Why don't we allow this in our moral systems? The idea that infinite or large numbers of side victims to an act of self-defense reaches a point of unacceptability. And in fact, I wouldn't need to have to kill millions of people for this situation to become unacceptable. I could merely be reckless with my gun in a self-defense situation and perhaps endanger the life of others. You would already agree that I have moved beyond what self-defense allows me by endangering other people. We don't accept in modern Western civilization, we do not accept it as a moral okay or a moral good to be able to kill as many people or kill large numbers of people without care in an act of self-defense and in an act of self-preservation. And this is the point I want to bring tonight on Israel. You can argue all sorts of things about Israel, that it is in a situation of self-defense, that it is pursuing war tactics, that it has to wage war to survive for itself. But certainly what I want, and what I think, I don't think Nick can disagree much with this. I know that he's a talented creator and I respect him as a thinker. I've seen some of his stuff. He's an intelligent guy. What I want to argue is that there are behaviors in the geopolitical strategy and military strategies of Israel which show disregard for human life to a point that we do not allow by modern Western moral standard. We do not allow our own nations to get away with this kind of action, this kind of razing to the ground of another civilization, these attacks that are careless and that end up in the death and suffering of innocents, always on the excuse of waging war, but ultimately hurting people who are not engaged in war. People who are innocents, who are non-fighters, children, women, etc. And I don't think it's, I think it's a barbaric aspect of the behavior of Israel, which traces to roots in intentional ways in which the Jewish people see themselves under threat and behaves as people who are under threat. And they behave with a kind of military paranoia that they have to exterminate the other to survive. So looking at the history of Israel, just a couple of quotes from people who have been not just loose individuals in Israel, but people who have been at the heart of determining the history of Israel, who have been leaders, military and political leaders. So David Ben-Gurion, in his diary, 1937, so the leader who was head of the Jewish Agency, considered Israel's first prime minister. He writes in 1937, "The compulsory transfer of the Arabs from the valleys of the proposed Jewish state could give us something which we never had. We are given an opportunity which we never dared to dream of. In many parts of the country, new settlement will not be possible without transferring the Palestinian peasants. Jewish power, which grows steadily, will also increase our possibilities to carry out the transfer on a large scale." So from the beginning of the history of Israel, you have this project of expulsing another people, of pushing them out. They existed, they were there, and they were pushed by violence, and they were pushed by war. And this behavior goes up to this day when you see the latest strikes onto Gaza. Other quotes that reveal parts of the history of Israel. Yitzhak Rabin, a native-born Israeli general. At some point, he says, "Drive them out," and he makes a gesture recalling the policies of David Ben-Gurion and making a gesture which meant we have to push them out of the country. Again, part of the history of Israel is the pushing out of a people that they consider they cannot live side by side with. Joseph Waitz, an Israeli official who directed the Jewish National Fund, who was part of land policy and afforestation departments. He says, as part of his commentary on policy, "There is no room in the country for both peoples. The only solution is a land of Israel without Arabs. Not one village must be left." So those are our statements that illustrate that there has always been in the history of Israel, there's always been a desire and a drive in leadership to push out the Arab population and to replace it. And this has been enacted in official policies and plans of the Israeli state for as long as the Israeli state has existed. We have the Plan Dalet, D-A-L-E-T. The Plan Dalet was a blueprint under Prime Minister Ben-Gurion for destroying infrastructure, pushing out villagers, and it resulted in 400 to 500 Palestinian villages being depopulated, 750,000 refugees produced from these acts of war, which targeted residential places, the places where people lived. David Ben-Gurion, again, in his writing, "Let us not ignore the truth among ourselves. Politically, we are the aggressors, and they defend themselves. The country is theirs because they inhabit it, whereas we want to come here and settle down. And in their view, we want to take away from them their country. Behind the terrorism by the Arabs is a movement which, though primitive, is not devoid of idealism and self-sacrifice." And in other commentaries of his diary, he states, "We must do everything to ensure that they never do return." In 2022, there's an Israeli documentary called Tenshura that comes out with statements and acknowledgements by people who have been involved in the pushing of Palestinians out of their places of living. And there are acknowledgements and admissions by the soldiers, by the veterans of the IDF, that they were engaged in war crimes, that they were committing mass killing at the very least, including possibly rape. These admissions have been made on camera. They are They are there to consult for anyone to see. We have other military leaders who are clearly indicating in the way they speak of war that they are looking to deprive, to create hunger, to block aid. Moshe Dayan, for example, comments on the villages. He says, Jewish villages were built in the place of Arab villages. You do not even know the names. There is not one single place built in this country that did not have a former Arab population. We shoot at those from among the 200,000 hungry Arabs who crossed the line. So there's this constant policy in the way Israeli officials comment on their war tactics that crosses the line between combat and population repression, population pushing, and various strategies that seek to make life hard for whoever stays, to the point where the Palestinians have been progressively pushed for the last 80 years. Gila Gamliel, a minister, recently stating, "We are fighting human animals with total siege, no electricity, no water, only destruction." So we have a series of statements here that to me convinces me that the way Israel approaches war is incompatible with a developed Western morality. Are they the worst people on earth? Maybe not. When I look at how nations wage war, there are the Pacific nations like Canada, very rarely engaged in war. Last time was a collaboration with the US. Then you have the European countries, not really engaged in much war, but sometimes some colonial strikes. Then you have the Eastern European countries like Russia. And when I see what Russia does in Eastern Ukraine, I would say there's a little bit more concern to preserve the locals, to attack military objectives. We can see that even Russia is at a higher standard of morality in the way it wages war than Israel is in the way it treated Gaza. So I would say Israel is somewhere between a barbaric African nation and Russia. I think it's a fair assessment. I think it's objective. I think it's realistic, and it's not rooted in hate. It's just it's an objective description of the techniques of war of Israel. They are techniques that involve collective punishment, that involve the strikes that are careless for the preservation of life of innocents, and that is a historical fact to me. So I can't wait to hear from Nick tonight. Perhaps he thinks similarly, perhaps he thinks differently, but am I missing something here? What I see is a nation that is willing to wage war in a way that kills a lot of people, and that is relatively careless about it. When we look at the polls, there's very high support in the polls for the transfer, expulsion of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip and various other dimensions of war that are, to me, very different from a country like Canada.
You got it. Thank you very much for that opening, JF. And folks, if it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, I'm your host, Dr. James Coons. We are a fully neutral platform hosting debates on science, religion, and politics, and it's only debates here. If you have not heard, if you've been living in a cave on Mars with your fingers in your ears, as you can see at the bottom right of your screen, Modern Day Debate's flagship event, DebateCon, is happening this July 25th and 26th in Dallas. Tickets are pinned in the live chat. They're also in the description box. It's going to feature Andrew Wilson, Rachel Wilson, Destiny, and within the next 24 hours, we're going to announce a huge additional name that's being added to the card. Check out DebateCon 8 right now. With that, we're going to kick it over to Nick. Thrilled to have you with us as well. The floor is all yours for your opening too.
Thank you, James, and thank you, JF, to my opponent for doing this debate. I appreciate you guys setting up the platform. It's the first time I'm on this. So tonight you're going to hear a lot of emotionally charged claims about Israel, where it's probably like genocide, colonization, ethnic cleansing. We've already kind of heard some of that, and comparisons designed to make Israel sound uniquely evil. Right off the bat, you hear a false equivalency said if somebody wanted to kill me, self-defense, or I would do self-defense, but doesn't mean I can kill an entire city. I agree with that sentiment. It's a false equivalence, this idea that an individual action, whether we're talking about like a bank robber in an area, do you take out the whole bank, or school shooter, do you take out the whole school, or self-defense, do I take out an entire city if there's an assassin, would be an individual situation that at very best would be like a SWAT team. This has nothing to do with international warfare or the laws of the United Nations Charter, with 51, 107 being in the hierarchy of international law, etc. So let's get ahead of some of these excuse me, some of these claims you're going to hear about Israel. First, the idea that Israel is a colonial project. That argument collapses immediately. Colonizers come from a foreign empire with a mother country. Jews are indigenous to the land of Israel, historically, archaeologically, and continuously. There has never been a Jewish mother empire sending settlers. In fact, a lot of the Jews that came into the land, the first major Aliyah was in 1881, which would have been 16 years before even Theodor Herzl and modern Zionism, if you will. Political Zionism actually is a better term. When they came into the land, they didn't come with like weapons of war. They actually came with weapons to actually desalt the population, drive out malaria swamps, actually create economic opportunity and purchase land, which most of that land wasn't even actually owned by Arab or Jew. It was state-owned with the Ottoman Empire system into the British that continued on that even up to the White Papers, which we'll get into, I'm sure. This is not France and Algeria. This is not British or Britain and India. It's a people returning to their ancestral homeland after exile. And here's a key contradiction you're going to hear tonight. They'll argue, as a lot of people do. I actually don't know JF. I appreciate it being, but I actually didn't know who he was for, so I don't want to put words in his mouth. But generally what I hear is you argue that Jews lost their right of return because they lived elsewhere too long, while simultaneously they'll argue that Palestinians have a permanent right of return after leaving. You can't really have both. It contradicts each other. Either displacement cancels claims or it doesn't. If it does, then both lose it. If it doesn't, then both have it. Either way, it would still be on the side of Israel. Because if they lose it, then we can talk about ways that nation states, even in the modern sense, come about. And if it doesn't, well, then your original claim falls apart. Second, you'll hear that Israel was founded through genocide, or there's a genocide in contemporary times, which is simply false. And it matters because words have definitions, which everyone I've ever debated, even those that have studied Article 2 in the UN definition in the UN Convention of 1948, ratified in 1951. And by studied, I mean they read the definition. They almost always get it wrong. Under international law, genocide requires dolus specialis, which is special intent to physically destroy a people. With that dolus specialis, to destroy the whole people, or in part meaning either in significant amount or the intention of being in whole. But you just don't complete the whole process, kind of like Hitler with the Holocaust, meaning a significant percentage of those people, like I said, stopping early. But since 1948, the Palestinian population has grown multiple times. As my opponent said, that alone doesn't settle everything, but it makes the genocide claim logically incoherent. And I'm sure we'll talk more about it as we go through the rest of this argument, through the rest of this debate. So I'll move on from that. What actually happened in 1948, and this is important, is a war. And I always it's funny that everyone on the other side always seems to forget to add that part in, really, or they'll kind of acknowledge it, but they'll underplay it at very best. A war started after the UN proposed partition, and really that was in November 29th, 1947. 4 days before that, you have Jamal al-Husseini, who specifically said, we will fight to the last Arab. By the way, my opponent said Palestinian, even when quoting Ben-Gurion. They never said Palestinian. They didn't refer to themselves as Palestinian. Arab is definitely much more appropriate. But he was part of the Arab Higher Committee. And he was quoted saying, "We will fight to the last Arab to ensure there was never a Jewish state." That was 4 days before the partition plan, which was about 6 months before May 14th, 1948, which was the founding of Israel. When war happens, populations are displaced, tragically on all sides. My opponent brought up Eastern Europe. If somehow ethnic cleansing, even though he got that definition wrong too, which we'll get into, but if somehow that makes a state delegitimate, then like all of Eastern Europe would be delegitimate. 12 to 14 million Germans were displaced. I'm not even talking about those that were part of the Reich and the ones that were just occupying Poland. I'm talking about those that were there for hundreds and hundreds of years, if not longer. 12 to 14 million were displaced before. Eastern Europe has this idea all throughout. And not just Eastern Europe, there's other places too. Hundreds of thousands of Arabs fled or were expelled. And at the same time, hundreds of thousands of Jews were expelled from Arab countries. So again, if displacement equals illegitimacy, then nearly every modern state would be illegitimate. I'm being a little hyperbolic with the word every. Third, you'll hear about reprisal killings, as we kind of already heard a little bit, and claims that Israel intentionally targets civilians. Let's be precise with this. Civilian deaths in war are tragedies, but there is a fundamental difference between targeting civilians and civilian casualties during conflict, even what you consider to be a heightened number. I served in the military for about 12 years, and I can guarantee you it's probably not as heightened as you think, but again, we'll get into that as we debate more, I'm sure. Hamas and similar groups, which actually just about every Palestinian group has some form of terrorism or terrorism support. I can't really think of any that's at least in any significant number that doesn't, but let's speak about Hamas and the 9 other that I can think of Palestinian factions inside of Gaza: PIJ, PRC, Army of Islam, Mujahideen brigades, PFLP, DFLP. They started modern terrorism. They openly target civilians, rockets aimed at cities, massacres like October 7th. Israel targets military infrastructure, even when that infrastructure doubles up as a civilian area and a militant usage. I'm sure my opponent agrees that Hamas had 0 military bases prior to the October 7th attacks, and I'm sure he also agrees that Gaza is one of the most densely populated areas in the entire region. And so if you just kind of do the math there, you can understand the idea of doubling up as civilian areas. Fourth, you'll hear that Israel seeks greater Israel, or maybe you might hear expansionist. I generally hear both. Again, I'm excited to hear what my opponent thinks on it. But, and then, they want all Palestinians, but reality contradicts the claim. 20% of Israel's population, really 21%, are Arab citizens with voting rights, representation in parliament, and roles in the judiciary and medical system. If Israel's goal were extermination or total expulsion, that population would not exist, let alone participate in the state. At the 1948-1949 war, when about 152,000 Arabs stayed and were given full citizenship, and then even up until 1952, they bring in another, I've seen claims somewhere between 80,000 to as high as 150,000, but regardless, close to 100,000 plus, brought back into the land to actually be given citizenship. This is not done by a government or people with the intent to depopulate the Arabs out of the land. First off, the ones that stayed. If Arabs stayed and were given full citizenship, if Israel truly kicked out almost the entire Arab population, they incorrectly say 750,000, even though that number didn't exist until much, much later. But again, we'll get into it. There would have been nothing stopping them if their intent was there to just kick out the remaining 150,000. What is it? That 750,000 they can kick out, but then they ran out of wind at 150,000 and then gave them all citizenship? Doesn't particularly show intent. You can quote things all day long, which was incorrect. Ben-Gurion's quote that he brought up, I know the quote very well. Again, he didn't say transfer Palestinians, I said transfer Arabs. Except it was talking about in the context of the Peel Commission. It comes from some of his writings, as my opponent said. And if you actually look at the Peel Commission in the context and you read the entire paragraph, he's talking about how he has the opinion open to the idea within the context of the Peel Commission. He wasn't saying that this was some kind of broad plan or something that they were actually executing. And I guess my opponent thinks they failed at. I'm not really sure what he thinks. But yes, you can quote people. Same thing with whites. He brought up whites, which comes from it was popularized by this YouTube video. I watched it a couple years ago. It's called 1948. I don't remember. It's called 1948 Palestine something. It's a pro-Palestinian video, and they incorrectly put up a little meme of whites saying this quote. They actually get the quote kind of wrong, but they get the gist of it correct. He was very much countered by much of the people in the government. My opponent's correct. He was part of the JNF. I'm not saying he was a nobody. But yes, this is a person with an opinion. I'm not denying that. And it's very easy to get people with opinions. Just like how I told you Jamal al-Husseini said that there will never ever be a Jewish state. I can quote all day long and I will run out of time if I talk about the amounts that said we will fight the Jews, not the Israelis, not the Zionists, the Jews until the blood flows like rivers. I can talk about, I can go on and on. The point is that it's very easy to go with these individualized quotes and not show actual intent. Plan Dalet also very much contested about what it was. Plan Dalet in its official form, and if you could just read it, is talking about preparing Hebrew cities when the British left because they were already being attacked essentially about 1 minute after the partition plan vote on November 29th, 1947. And they weren't attacking Israel because, well, Israel didn't exist yet. They were attacking Jews. And the very first actual massacres, if you want to go back and forth, actually started in the 1947 before Deir Yassin or any of the things post May 14th, 1948. There was one in April 1948. I think that was the Deir Yassin one, but there was one in May. And I'm not denying that atrocities didn't happen in the context of war. And I'm not even saying that there weren't groups like Irgun, Lehi, Stern Gang, who were not part of the official defense force like the Haganah, that didn't do more extreme measures. The Haganah themselves actually sometimes fought against the Irgun. They would blow up weapon shipments and they would spread lies about them to delegitimize them. But in the end, I'm not arguing that they're perfect, so I'm not conceding that thought at all. Fifth, you'll hear that Palestinians are simply resisting occupation, but resistance matters in form, not just in label. Targeting civilians is not legitimate resistance under any legal or moral framework. It's terrorism, period. If international law that talks about justification for resistance still requires compliance with the rules within Additional Protocol 1, which I'm sure my opponent knows about, which Palestinian terrorist organizations follow absolutely none of it. So if my opponent, which I'll see, is trying to use international law or appeal to it, then he'll be forced to explain why that either matters, and if it does, why does he not hold it even against a quote-unquote resistance group? Because they do have these laws. Now, if he's throwing international law out the window and he's just saying that's just his opinion personally, well, then that's a totally different argument, and I have one for that as well. This creates the core issue in the conflict. Israelis fear annihilation because of repeated attacks. Palestinians fear occupation because of military control and displacement and brainwashing. Both fears exist, regardless of what the reason is. They exist, but only one side is consistently told its fear is illegitimate. And that's the problem, is that the double standard held against Israel, or a lot of times the singular standard held against Israel. Finally, you'll hear that Israel rejects peace, but historically multiple offers of partition and statehood have been made and repeatedly rejected. That doesn't mean Israel is perfect, far from it, but it does mean the narrative of Israel alone blocking peace is incomplete at best and misleading at worst. If we're going to have an honest debate tonight, we have to start with consistent standards, accurate definitions, and really a willingness to apply logic equally, not selectively. Because once you kind of strip away that rhetoric, exaggeration, and double standards, the anti-Israel argument doesn't just weaken, it completely collapses. And I'll just end with saying the idea that if someone holds a gun to my head, I will use self-defense, but it has to be proportional or at least relatively, consistent with the military advantage versus the attack that you do. Again, we're not really talking about that. We're talking about this idea that I'm committing terrorism because of what you did to me 80 years ago, or really 100 plus years ago, because they go back sometimes to the Balfour Declaration of 1917, First Aliyah of 1881. Generally, some people do different things. I can go back to the 1936 Jaffa riots and the 36 to 39 Arab revolts, where they slaughtered about 500 Jews. I can go back to 1929 with the Hebron massacre, where they go to the anti-Zionist Jewish community and thank you. And the anti-Zionist Jewish community. They were anti-Zionist openly. They knew it. In fact, the Haganah goes over there, tells them, we're here to protect you because we know the Arabs are going to attack this place. And they said, get out of here, Zionists. We don't want you here. And then guess what? Weeks later, the Arabs attacked that place and they slaughtered Jews. It didn't matter if it was Zionism. This idea that it's because of this occupation Zionist movement. No, it isn't. It's because they're Jews. I can go back to 1517 with the Hebron massacre in Sfat. I can go back to William Young in 1839 that specifically writes a paper to the British saying that the Muslims are doing this. I was during the Ottomans. They're not Arabs. And I can see the rest of my time.
And with that, we're going to jump into the open dialogue, folks. If you're new here, we'll have a Q&A following the open dialogue. You can submit questions via tagging me with @ModernDayDebate. Otherwise, Super Chat will push your question to the top of the list. And if you haven't yet, check out our channel memberships. At the bottom right of your screen, we have over 350 debates in total, some of our most juicy, in fact. Click that join button and see the perks that we have for our memberships. With that, we're going to kick it into open dialogue. Thank you very much, gentlemen. The floor is all yours.
All right. I think it was getting good at the end, Nick, but I'm reassured that I can still design a good intro by judging by the number of times you had to say, we will hear that. Nick has not been really opposing to much of what I've said. Nick has mostly been dropping on the usual anti-Israel argument. It's okay, he prepared for some other arguments, but I'd like us to come back to the standards that I've laid out and to the arguments that I'm actually making, which is that Israel on trial, judging the behavior of Israel, it behaves as a barbaric nation right now. And it has been behaving as a barbaric nation in the past. Now, notice, this argument does not rely on whether the Arabs also have things to reproach to themselves. The Arabs could be evil, they could be wrong too. But my judgment of Israel is by the standard of a modern nation. They wage war in a way that shows recklessness for human life, independent of what the other side is doing. Because when you throw a bomb onto a residential building with women and children in it, you are killing people who were not going to shoot you. You are killing people who were not going to become soldiers. Certainly, part of the people you are killing can be described as such. And this is what I take issue with. Combats of existence, you know, I had my friend Gonzalo Lira, who unfortunately died at the hands of the Zelensky regime under torture. He was always telling me this. He was saying, all is fair in love and war. And I believe that to an extent. When war starts, when people start being afraid for their own existence and they think they have to kill the other before the other kills them, pretty much anything goes. And I'm a moral nihilist, so I don't think there are any objective standards on which we have to agree, even including international law to an extent, very relative in the way it treats things and very relative in the way it applies things. We keep seeing these people, these anti-Israel people rooting for the ICC. The International Court has found genocidal intent. And it really means nothing if you don't have the power to apply it. So I put all of this on the side and I seek a form of agreement tonight with Nick. At the end, you kind of mentioned it, that yes, there were atrocities and that yes, leadership members, individuals in the leadership sometimes have said and have used atrocity language. They have used wrong language. Are we agreeing on this, Nick?
Well, I want to point out that Weitz wasn't a leader. I mean, the JNF wasn't part of particularly like the government in terms of a application of strategy, especially militarily. With Ben-Gurion, as I quoted, you definitely misrepresented what he said. Can you give me which leader you're talking about? Or are you saying today in contemporary times?
Well, I'm thinking up to contemporary times when we have the recent statements that I cited of Gila Gamliel. Or you can go back to Ben-Gurion or Yates. I mean, there are suggestions in those speeches that there is a willingness or at least a carelessness about pushing a population out of its place of living, including innocence.
Yeah, so how many people do you think was pushed out via direct force, and how many do you think left? And then what do you think the overall number is if we're going with the 1948-49 war?
From 1948 to today?
No, just the war. 48 to 49
just the war. I have no idea, but some of the numbers that are suggested are in the hundreds of thousands. And I don't really care about this question morally, because the problem is direct force and the accompaniment of direct force with intimidation and with the potentiality of direct force is what pushes most people out in an ethnic cleansing or in a situation of expulsion. So the problem is that you don't necessarily have to commit much violence if you can instill fear in people. And to me, right, someone who is moving out of their place of living under threat is the victim of violence, even if just threatened.
That doesn't matter to me, because what you're doing is you're not splitting the difference between war and an intent to specifically kick out an entire people to make it more ethnically homogenous, which, by the way, is the actual definition of ethnic cleansing, which also, by the way, is actually not really illegal. Ethnic cleansing by itself is actually not something that's illegal. Now, certain actions within ethnic cleansing can violate the Rome Statute, Geneva Conventions, etc., which is why I asked you about the number. It's not, I do agree with you in the sense that getting a pinpoint number may not matter. It's more about the actions, but everything you just described, at least as of right now, sounds like it could be war to me, or possibly an intent to genocide or ethnically cleanse a people via terrorism. So which one are you balancing here? Are you just talking about war?
Yeah, I mean, it's an important question. I have a subtle response to it, and it's not that I want to be evasive, but I judge people based on the consequences of their action that they knew would happen. And so to me, it's not a technical question of is there intent. I really don't care all that much about intent. I think that if you are an intelligent person and if you are a developed civilization, you inherit moral duty from the capacities of your technological developments. That is, if you have something like the nuclear bomb or just missiles or just guns, you have a moral duty that you inherit from understanding that the use of these guns or the use of these bombs will have massive effects, including those side effects that you don't even target. So to me, the question of intent is a red herring, a complete red herring in these cases. And I know what you refer to. You're referring to the ethnic cleansing and genocide definitions by UN and other entities and treaties.
Well, you're the one that used the terminology, so I have to go with it.
I didn't. Tonight, what I argued is that Israel is doing wrong things.
You never said ethnic cleansing?
I did talk about ethnic cleansing, but I didn't say Israel was doing it, because to me, it's a red herring. To me, it's a side question. The question is Israel acting in ways that are careless for the consequences of their action, to their military action on human life? And my answer to this is yes.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So you're not saying that Israel is necessarily doing ethnic cleansing. I'm pretty sure, I thought that's what you said, but maybe I misheard you. So it's not that Israel's doing ethnic cleansing. You think it's a red herring to actually even bring up specific definitions of what you think Israel's doing. Well, I think the purposeful vagueness makes debate kind of difficult, because you can always fall back and say, I don't want to answer that. And just because I'm not particularly talking about the specifics, which, okay, fair enough. But if you're going to go with just general acts that could have direct and secondary side effects that can be determined as not with the intent, but the actions itself being evil, wrong, whatever word you want to pick. If we're going to go with that, then yeah, every war in history would have those acts, every single war. But we're here to debate we're here to debate the idea that is it wrong, at least within a reasonable doubt. Because if we're just here to argue, that like war has wrong actions, which I agree with, then what's the point exactly of the debate? What is it that you're trying to actually claim? Because
this
all
is
war,
exactly
especially
where I wanted to lead us.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, war is wrong. War is wrong, and killing people is wrong. And that is what I have to say. And the way Israel does it is particularly careless. So it's even more wrong than other wars. That is my point. That is the point I've been concluding with in my intro. And it seems we're not so far, you and I.
No, we're completely far, because you just did it again. You are saying that Israel is going beyond just general warfare. So back to my original claim, what you described, again, I'm not saying you don't have further arguments, but at the context of what you described so far, you described warfare, not warfare that's really, really bad compared to average warfare. You described warfare, especially in urban, densely populated areas. And then if you're going with contemporary times, add in guerrilla warfare mix. You agree that civilians are displaced and die more likely in densely populated warfare. Is that a fair statement than not densely populated warfare?
That's a factual statement. It has no moral content, but it's a factual statement.
Okay, and then you agree that it's even higher when going against a guerrilla warfare unit, like, for example, one that uses unconventional means, like when they fight, they are amongst the civilian population wearing civilian clothing. Do you agree, or is it factual to say that it would be even higher, more or less?
It's factual.
Okay, so everything you're saying is not absent of just warfare, even without the context of densely populated guerrilla warfare. So if your claim is not necessarily ethnic cleansing or genocide, but your claim is still it is worse than just the average warfare, then I'm going to have to explain, because so far all you've described was just general warfare. In the first weeks of the 1948 war, about 70,000 Jews were displaced out, most of them women, children, and or just civilians. And many of them never got to return to their homes, because Jordan ends up taking Judea Samaria, and they, according to their national law in the 1950s, they say no Jews allowed, not no Israelis, not no Zionists, no Jews. And so many of them never got to see their homes again, because they died prior to the 6-day war. But I wouldn't make the argument that the Arab armies were necessarily having some intent to, well, the Jordanians did later, but that's separate, to like ethnically cleanse or genocide, or as you're claiming right now, just worse than average warfare. That's war.
Well, again, that's good. We're progressing here. Now we need to settle the scale, because your main question to me is, how is what Israel doing more wrong? And let's use a standard to begin with. Let's start with Canada's participation to the war in Afghanistan, for example. Canada has not razed cities to the ground in Afghanistan. Canada has not led to buildings crumbling onto families, women, and children. So definitely there is a way to wage war. And I know I'm using an extreme example. I want us to start there, and then we'll reach Israel. But
it's a false equivalence.
It's not an equivalence. It is a scale that I'm setting up. And I'm saying there is a scale in the way nations wage war. And on that scale, Israel is on the wrong side. It is not the most clean way to manage war in terms of damaging civilian lives. So Canada is one example in Afghanistan. The US, for example, to me, is a nation that is closer to Israel. It is more ruthless, and it has at times struck nations unjustly, and it has killed a lot of people, accepting collateral damage. But if you want the whole scale, there you have it. You have certain nations like Canada that are very careful. You have certain nations like the US that are less careful and more ruthless. And then you have nations like Israel who allow themselves the complete razing of an entire city.
Yeah, so the reason my opponent just used Canada and Afghanistan and tried to compare it to Israel and Gaza is it's not even close to equivalent. And I'll tell you why. As someone who served in the US military, at least, not the Canadian, although I did train the Canadians, but nonetheless, so Afghanistan, first off, is nothing like Gaza. It was mostly huge rural terrain. So trying to say that don't get me wrong, they did fight in certain cities, and those absolutely were razed. They looked, in fact, if I showed you a picture, you would think it's Gaza. But most of the fighting, especially with Canada's support, which is what I'm going to get to in a second, was huge rural terrains and support. The second point, then, why it makes no sense to compare it to Israel and Gaza is because Israel is the sole fighter in Gaza. It would be the equivalent of if somebody kind of had a support group helping Israel from the side and maybe helped with certain campaigns. And then imagine Gaza was the size of Afghanistan, which is, it's kind of cut off on my map, but whatever. Imagine it was the size of that with almost huge rural terrains. And let's say the other country is, I don't know, just pick one, Azerbaijan. Let's say Azerbaijan was helping them, right? And Azerbaijan helped with mostly the huge rural terrains in Afghanistan. And I go, oh, well, see, Azerbaijan, they're really good with how they do war because look at these strikes in Afghanistan in these rural areas, and then look at Gaza. It makes no sense. It doesn't even compare. So that's why you picked that example, because it's an example where you're saying, oh, it's modern warfare, and it was against, I don't know, brown people, I guess. I don't really know what's your point. Maybe it was because it's in the Middle East.
No, because it was a war waged by white people. That is very interesting. When you look at the way white nations...
And also irrelevant.
No, it is not irrelevant at all. I do believe that there is a fundamental different form of humanity and morality in people of different races, and they approach war in a way that looks at life much cheaper the browner they are. The browner the population is, the more likely they are to wage war in a way that is careless for human life. There's a whole scale that we can go from northern countries down to Africa.
Sure, it has nothing to do with guerrilla warfare at all.
No, but your point about about guerrilla warfare, let's address it. I believe that no matter the context of the war, you inherit a moral responsibility when you wage war and when there are side victims to this war. And it is very clear to me that not everyone in Palestine was a warrior. And so to me, Israel is lacking respect in the treatment of these side casualties, these, I don't know how you guys call it, collateral damage. Yeah. Collateral damage. And it's simply this. When you decide to wage war, you have to take into account the victims that have not started this war and that do not deserve to die. And you have to act in ways that minimize it, in my personal view, beyond international law, in my moral judgment.
So do you know what the Al-Mawasi zone is in Canada, in Gaza?
No.
The Al-Mawasi zone was the humanitarian zone that was set up pretty much right at the beginning of the Gaza war, prior to really any major ground operations. It's named after the town, I think it was a Bedouin town, it was pretty rural, called Al-Mawasi, but the zone itself expanded over, there's 5 zones of Gaza from north to south, and expanded over really 2.5 of them, right? From Rafah, Khan Yunis, Deir al-Balah. And that was the humanitarian zone that the Palestinians were told to migrate to. And even the Israeli military actually helped a lot of the Palestinians migrate there, because they were telling the IDF that Hamas was stopping them, shooting them, putting up blockades. And so there was, times where, and there's videos of this, where the Israeli military actually helped them migrate down south. About 500,000 Palestinians actually stayed up north because they just didn't care to listen. They didn't want the help from the IDF. They didn't want to leave, which they're human beings. They can do whatever they want. My question to you is, how many times, because there were times like Mohammed Def, I don't know if you know who he is, he was killed while in the Al-Mawasi zone. So I'm not going to say Israel never struck the Al-Mawasi zone, but when looking at the entire conflict from October 7th to today, do you know how many times the Al-Mawasi zone was struck?
No idea.
Next to negligible. And so if Israel's intent, right, regardless of what specific adjective or claim you're going to use against Israel beyond just bad war, if that's their intent, it's very weird. That would have been a perfect strike. There was over 300 NGOs that were allowed into Gaza to operate in those zones, etc. And so back to, I guess, Canada, Afghanistan. Well, yeah, I think we've exhausted that. I just think that this idea that Gaza is not unique in the warfare they fought. According to Al Jazeera, Israel has used 200,000 tons of explosives. Okay, whether that's particularly accurate or not, I'm not sure. Al Jazeera is obviously very biased against Israel, but it's something we can springboard off of. And according to Hamas, there's been about 70,000 deaths, including all, not just 70,000 civilians, 70,000 Hamas, PIJ, PRC, Army of Islam, PFLP, DFLP, collaborators, and of course, civilians, right? Even if we assume 70,000 civilians, let's just pretend hypothetically that Israel didn't kill any Hamas members at all. It was all civilians. This idea is insane, because if there's 200,000 tons, that would be 200,000 2,000-pound bombs, which is pretty rarely used in context. Most of the time they use GBU-39s, it's like 37 pounds of explosives. TNT, it includes, etc. By the way, I'm not even including ground operations. I'm not including bullets. I'm not including anything. I'm just straight up explosives. That's about 500,000 bombs. I mean, give or take, maybe more. I mean, I'm being pretty conservative with the number. It's pretty low, actually. But this idea, even if only 10 people were killed per bomb, that would be 5 million people, which is 2.5 times the population of all of Gaza. That'd be like killing them, bringing them back to life, killing them again, bringing them back to life, and killing half of them again. And that's only if 10 were killed in an explosive, which obviously a lot more could, if, this is the key word, if the intent was there. Except we don't see that at all. In fact, it's less than one person. And again, I want to make very clear, that's less than one, whether we're talking about a Hamas terrorist or a civilian. So there's 2 options here that I see, unless you can correct me. Either one, Israel does have the intent, but they really, really, really suck. They just keep missing. Because we know the numbers are fairly accurate in the amount of explosives they have. And again, I'm not counting any bullets, by the way. Or the intent's not there, and the intent is actually to destroy military infrastructure and advantage, and most of the explosives we see actually don't have civilians in those buildings. Because if those buildings were filled with civilians, like I said, even if there was only 10 people in the building, we would see 5 million deaths. Well, we wouldn't, because there's not even 5 million people in Gaza. So can you explain to me how we've seen 200,000 tons, give or take, of explosives in Gaza, not counting any bullets or ground operations with that? How is it that the population, if we believe Hamas's numbers, is only, or sorry, not population, death toll is only 70,000?
Those are 2 very important questions. First, the quantity of explosives. Definitely, Israel is using explosives for more than targeting life. Israel is using explosives to destroy an entire civilization. So part of the use of these explosives is actually not to kill people, but to destroy buildings in a way that make any return very hard. So that's my view of what's the strategy there, if you ask me. On the other question, the question of, well, why don't they shoot into the tents? Like, it would be very easy. You are absolutely correct. It would be very easy for Israel to absolutely genocide the Palestinian people within 24 hours. They are very concentrated. All of them are easily victimizable in the current state. So why don't they do it? Well, I believe there's many reasons. I believe there's public pressure. I don't believe they think they can allow themselves from a geopolitical credibility perspective, maintenance of alliance. I believe that they understand that there's a degree of blatantness in the way of what they do that would be unacceptable and that would put them at a disadvantage in the next 100 years with relation to other nations. So it's not because you can do something and you don't do it that there is no concern to be had about your behavior of restraint. It's a relatively restrained behavior compared to what they could do, but it's a relatively unrestrained behavior compared to what I hold a modern nation to. That's the spot where I'm at.
Okay, so you invoke, it would be easy to genocide the Palestinian population 24 hours. Agreed, everyone agrees with that, but that's not the argument I'm making. So first off, it's interesting how people on the pro-Palestinian side will use the word genocide, right? But then their argument, they end up debunking themselves because they'll go from, oh, it is a genocide, then why is the numbers not this? Well, they're doing a slow genocide is what they say, but the reason they debunk themselves is they go from it is a genocide to, okay, they want it to be a genocide, but it's really not because they can't do it because of international pressure. So is it a genocide or bad war, whatever term you want to use, or is it that they just want to do a genocide or bad war, whatever term you want to use, but they can't? And real quick, and the other thing is that I wasn't off when I said 5 million people, again, 2.5 times the entire population of Gaza. Your argument would only make sense of they're doing it slowly or carefully so they don't get too much international pressure, I guess. They get plenty. That would make sense if the numbers were off by a little bit. Like instead of using a multiple of 10 people, which was extremely conservative, I'd say, very, very conservative. I was being conservative in your favor. If instead of using a multiple of 10, you do 1, it's still off. We're not talking about it being off by 10% or 20%. It's only, and again, that's if we believe Hamas, it's 70,000. It's off by almost the entire amount. It becomes negligible. So your argument only makes sense if it's off by, let's say, up to 50%, but it's not. It's off by like, I don't know, 1,200%. I don't know. I'm doing quick math. The second thing you said about they're making it so that way they can't return. Okay, so that's kind of interesting because Israel has agreed. They said that they're not going to pitch in, which makes sense. They don't have to do it. But they said that they've agreed to help with and agreed to a plan to help rebuild Gaza. So other than just like paying for it themselves, why would they agree to that plan if the whole plan is actually, hey, we can't genocide the people will be mad, but if we just destroy enough of their buildings, then they have to leave. Why are they helping to rebuild it then?
Well, I remember the statements of Netanyahu recently saying this place belongs to us. That's what Netanyahu said. And so when Israel agrees to something, it's not worth toilet paper in my view. They've agreed to ceasefire and violated them before. They can agree to a rebuilding of Gaza, but that's probably an excuse down the line to keep more control over the place. Israel never agrees to something if it's not in their interest, and they typically have a vicious interest in exploiting those agreements to weaken their adversaries. Now, on the question of genocide and ethnic cleansing, important questions. I've been intentionally today avoiding the use of these words, simply because I think that when you get into those semantics, it's a loss of time. It really doesn't matter, which is why I present the case tonight for its bad practices of war, if you want to call them that. That's because I want to grant as much generosity to Israel and to you as I can. But down the line, the definition of genocide, the problem is people keep demanding that, well, the genocide has to be completed for me to call it a genocide. And no, the reality, well, the thing is, we often hear this in those debates. And the thing is, we don't hold other populations to this standard. No one ever argues in historical debates that the Germans didn't commit the genocide of the Jews because there are still Jews surviving today. Yet we hear that in debates around Israel. We hear counts of heads.
I've never heard that once. I just want to point that out.
You just did it today where you
No.
started counting the Palestinians and you said, look, their populations are growing. So it's a bad genocide.
What I'm
you
saying,
did it today. People are capable of rewinding.
That's not what you said. You said that we hear that it has to be completed. Don't be disingenuous. I said I've never heard that before. I've never heard once that a genocide is only, first off, the Holocaust wasn't completed. There's still Jews alive. I've never heard that. And if anyone has ever made that argument, they're very much in the minority. Nobody in the world. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna have to stop you because it's nobody. You're using a straw man argument. Nobody in the world thinks this.
You've never heard this. Exactly. But we hear a similar argument in the case of the Palestinians and Israel. And you did one in this very stream. And listen to that. You said, no, the Palestinian population keeps growing. So if it's a genocide, it's not a very good genocide. You said this
that in that context.
Yeah, people can rewind and they can see.
No, I'll explain it. I did say that the population keeps growing, but that wasn't in the context. By the way, you didn't even invoke the word genocide at that point. That wasn't my opening statement. It wasn't in the context of I never said the words, it's not a genocide solely because the population keeps growing. I was saying that in completely different context, but it doesn't matter because the words you just used right now were, we hear a lot in the debate circle of Israel-Palestine that a genocide is only a genocide when it's completed. Please feel free, everyone, to go rewind and hear him say that. No, I'm not gonna say literally no one. There's 8 billion people in the world. Maybe someone has said that, but that's just such a weak argument. And at the beginning of this conversation, you criticized my introduction because you said I was making arguments that you weren't going to make or you don't believe. And now you're making an argument that I certainly don't believe. Genocide is specifically defined as the dolus specialis, special intent, which is not the same as intent that everyone messes up in the definition of genocide, right? With both the physical and mental element requirement, right? To destroy a protected population in whole or in part. That's what it means. Not it has to be completed, not any of this other stuff. So if you want to make the argument of genocide, make it, but that I don't believe that.
I argue that by dismissing concerns about the practices of wars that I've raised today, and by dismissing them by saying, look, the Palestinian population is flourishing, you are missing something morally. It's not because a population is growing in numbers that it is not the victim of unjust warfare tactics. And that is the argument I'm making tonight.
Yeah, no, I never said that. I didn't say that they were flourishing at all. I didn't say any of
You didn't use the word flourishing, but you described the growing Palestinian population, didn't you?
Yeah, of course, in the context that I was talking about, because it's important, but not to try to say that war isn't awful and that the conditions that they're living in, which a lot of it's on their own doing, is not awful or the doing of their government. I never once implied that at all. As for Netanyahu saying this, you said this place belongs to us. I think what you're talking about is when he was talking about the security control. I'm pretty sure, and he didn't use the words "this place belongs to us." What he said was, in fact, he's actually been very careful to not call Gaza specifically Israeli sovereign territory. But if I think I know what you're talking about. He was specifically talking about Gaza being under the control of Israeli security, which comes actually about from the Oslo Accords anyways, just because Hamas decided to rip those up and pull it out doesn't really mean. But anyways, I'm just saying that there's context there. And so unless you're bringing up a different quote, can you tell me when he said that?
I have the note here. It was in a press conference, May 2025, closed door Knesset meeting. Yeah, and it was reported in the news. I mean, people can go and see that sentence. This place belongs to us. I'm absolutely certain that he stated this. And it was in the context of the discussion about Trump, Gaza control, America setting up something for the Gazans under some sort of Israeli supervision.
And I just looked it up. I don't see anything on that. I mean, I'm looking, there's a Haaretz article from December 2025 that doesn't say it. The AI overview, which I don't generally like it, but I'm trying to just quickly say, it says, based on reports from May 2025, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened his security cabinet to discuss the next stage of the war in Gaza, with specific direct quotes of him while specific direct quotes of him saying Gaza belongs to us in a closed-door meeting have not been verified in the results, reports in late July 2025 indicate that Netanyahu was considering plans about the Gaza Strip. This is the AI
So
overview
I've
saying this
put in the chat of the Zoom call a CTV News article called Israel PM vows there will be no Palestinian state, September 11, 2025. And he is quoted as saying the exact words that I've used.
Okay, I'll read it. Go ahead.
We are going to fulfill our promise that there will be no Palestinian state. This place belongs to us.
Okay, got it. So he didn't talk about Gaza, and he's okay. Got it. So you misquoted him. So yes, he's saying Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed on Thursday that there would be no Palestinian state, speaking at a signing ceremony for a major settlement project in the occupied West Bank. And it also is talking about Ma'ale Adumim, which I've been to before. I know where that's at. So this has nothing to do with Gaza, for one. And two, he's talking in the context of saying he's not going to sign a Palestinian state, which I agree with. I'm not a two-state solution delusioner. So okay, so one, you're wrong, and two, it's just
he said it
there's a lot
in
of
a
context
place
there.
called Male Adumim. He was talking about the Palestinian state.
He said he was talking about God. Okay, fine. Go ahead.
He was definitely talking about the Palestinian state. And when he says this place belongs to us, he means the territory of Israel as a whole. And he means he will not allow any sort of control by any sovereign people on it. It was in the context where Trump was discussing the potentiality of having a two-state solution or some sort of deal for the Arabs.
Okay, I mean, good. That's a good thing. I don't understand why a two-state solution would be a good thing at all. First off, it doesn't even. Where does the concept of a two-state solution even come from? Where does the concept that the West Bank, quote unquote, belongs to the Palestinian people? It was, I'm pretty sure, if you correct me if I'm wrong, occupied by Jordan illegally, by the way. It was only recognized by the UK and Pakistan, I believe, and internationally it wasn't recognized. But even still, occupied from 49 administratively in 50 to 1967. So even if you want to argue occupation, who are they occupying? Jordan? Except no, you can't argue that because in 1988, Jordan relinquishes all control of the West Bank. In fact, if you look up the state of Palestine's independence, it's November 15th, 1988, not coincidentally, which is 40 years after the state of Israel. So what gives a brand new state, again, officially 40 years, well, it's still not officially because it's not technically registered, not registered, but fully recognized. But let's go with the 1988 independence. What gives them the right to cut out a state that they weren't even in control of before? Jordan was. And if you go with Gaza, it was Egypt that controlled it until 1967. So why should I accept the premise of a Palestinian state? And please explain it in the terms of the UPJ principle, the uti possidetis juris, which is customary international law.
I don't use that principle in particular, but I believe in the sovereignty and the self-determination of any people. I'm a Canadian separatist. When I was in Quebec, I believed in the separation of Quebec. When I now live in Alberta, I believe in the separation of Alberta. I do believe that a nation that wants to be separate, a people, should be able to claim that independence and sovereignty.
Anyone.
Otherwise, you are allowing a form of violent imperial colonialism, a federalism of sorts.
Anyone, right? Just to make sure you said that. Anyone. So like if the Samaritans, let's say the state of Palestine comes about in what is called the West Bank, okay, the one that's on the east side of Palestine. If the West Bank becomes a state of Palestine and the Samaritans, who half of them live in the West Bank, first off, the state would now split up the Samaritan community, some living outside of Tel Aviv, some living in Area B outside of Shechem. If you were to split them and they decided because of this, they wanted their own state, are you now going to split up the new state of Palestine again to give to the Samaritans who have been there for thousands of years?
Absolutely. I believe in the absolute and down to the individual sovereignty. I believe if someone does not consent to the society they've been included in against their will, they should be able to claim that sovereignty. And they should be able to
even
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
They
finish.
should be able to arrange into any sort of political contractual arrangement, whether it's a locality, a city, a group, a family, or a nation.
Well, contractual would mean both sides. So what happens if the contractual entity falls apart because both sides don't agree. Because by your logic, you're saying literally anyone. That's tens of thousands, if not more, of difference of people. If they all decided, we're not talking about, because you're saying sovereignty. You're not even just talking about like self-determination, which I believe all people have. You're talking about sovereignties, taking from other states, which you're allowed to have your own opinion regardless of how ridiculous it is, but that's your personal opinion. But you have to explain it, and you kind of did a little bit. You said it has to be contractual. Well, how do you contractually say we're going to take every single state and we're splitting it all up and you have to give it to me based off of whatever plan you're saying? What if they just say no? Then what?
Well, by contractual, I basically mean consensual. And if there is disagreement, then there is no consent. So if my neighbor doesn't like me and doesn't want to form a city with me, then he has no right to tax me and I have no right to tax him. So that's the answer.
But we're not talking about neighbors here. We're talking about government.
This applies at any scale. If a city or if a province in Canada wants to break away, they should be entitled to do so. And perhaps there will be a subset of that province that wants to stay in Canada, and they should arrange that too. There are various situations.
Every other person wants to. Are you going to put a bunch of squares of different states? How does this work?
Then they are all individuals. They won't have a state if they're all fragmented in that way. This is
okay,
not.
What's the minimum? What's the minimum number? Well, no, I think it's important to hammer down so I can properly answer you. What's the minimum number then?
No, I don't think there is a minimum number, but there is historical precedent. If you look at the Native American reservations, although it was it was a big failure historically, it was an attempt to provide sovereignty that is deserved from a people with the goal of alleviating the effects of colonialism, of saying, look, we're sorry, we took your shit, and here's a space that you can be free in. I would want to extend this kind of opportunities.
Kind of like what Canada did to the Métis people, since we're talking about how great Canada is, right?
Well, Canada sucks at doing it because the problem with Canada is that they give away private property and they do so without the consent of the owners. But with consent and with contractual arrangement, I believe there is a way to live together on this planet. And I see no effort in the Middle East to take that route.
I just thought maybe Canada was such a great example since you were using them as such a great example for Afghanistan. And then I just thought about the Métis people.
Oh, they're very bad when they give your house to Native Americans.
You know what? You and I can agree on that. I'm not a full-fledged libertarian, but I do have libertarian values and I'm all for private. In fact, I wish we pushed private market more and whatnot, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Maybe we can have a coffee over that one day. But yeah, okay. So with the Palestinian people, and I guess since you already said yes to anything, if the Druze wanted to split, yes. If the Samaritans wanted to, yes. The Bedouins wanted to, yes. Maybe even individual tribes. Have you ever heard of the Emirate plan with Israel-Palestine?
No, the plan.
It's called the Emirate plan. It's pushed a lot by a guy named Dr. Mordechai Kader. And essentially what it is, and I don't know, maybe it's something you look into. It's for people that see the issues with the one-state solution, but also aren't pro two-state solution. It's an Emirate plan, which is favorable to a lot of Arabs, actually, because if you look into the regions of the Palestinian territory, there's a lot of tribes and that sounds rude. Prevalent Arab families that control specific territories, not just in Gaza, but even in Judea, Samaria. And so when you look at this, the Emirate plan is instead of, he calls it, I think, the 8-state solution. It's a little tongue-in-cheek, but essentially it's not actual states. It's an Emirate plan where you have, yes, it's still a Jewish state and autonomy, but what you have is individual local emirates where Palestinian Arab families who already have a control and a very high respect in these areas, they keep those areas. And essentially what it is they will have a certain sense of autonomy as an emirate instead of trying to say, should it be 2 states, should it just be 1 state under 1 government, and because both sides have a problem. I'm not even saying that I particularly agree or don't agree with that, and I'm not here to argue that because you've never heard of it. I'm just saying maybe it's something you'd be interested in looking at one day.
All right, thanks for the info.
Sure.
Now, in general, what the lesson that I'm retaining from what we've been discussing for the last 5 minutes is that the states are collectivization tools for violence. And Israel is doing that collectivization at a certain scale.
Are you talking about collective punishment?
It is a relatively small scale when you compare to big nations, but it is such a concentrated scale, and we see it because they are supposedly our allies, and therefore we inherit the moral duties of having those allies. A lot of people are starting to call on social media this week, let's get rid of this alliance with Israel because we cannot sustain a point at which they commit such violations of human rights, and they're starting to get denounced even by presumed allies like Western Europe right now. Eventually, the US and Israel will be two left alone standing violators of human rights in an entire planet that will be denouncing them. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's all talk. I think Europe has become, just to put it plainly, pussies. I think that they have absolutely been taken over by just far leftism, and they are all talk and no bite. The same exact people who have already been ahead of some of the Western, northern European countries, like Spain, for example, have already been ahead of that and trying to cut ties with Israel just for weeks later to actually go back in harder with Israel behind kind of closed doors and sort of secret, but nothing's really secret because they found out that they actually needed them, and they actually ended up sending more money into the Israeli economy while still criticizing it on the world stage. Because it turns out that Western Europe has fallen completely in this idea of military strategy. United States gives more into NATO, except somehow the UK, 16 of their 17 major naval ships are actually under repair right now, even though there's absolutely no reason for it to be. They haven't been in war using those ships in a very, very, very long time. We send them so much money, they haven't used it. I don't actually know what they've used it for. There's reports saying that they diverted it to welfare systems instead of actually putting it where it should have been, which is to build up the military capability of NATO as a whole. So if they feel the need to do that, they're a sovereign country, feel free. But this idea that it's going to work out for them, I don't think much on it. As for back to because the argument right now is Israel, right? Is it again? We haven't really solidified what we're arguing. The best we've gotten out of you is that you think they commit war badly.
Yes,
and
that's
the
my
numbers. Okay, and the numbers, if you look at even before major U.S. involvement in Syria, but if you look at Aleppo in 2016, for example, with the airstrikes alone, there was like 32 civilian to 1, give or take. I've read 28 to 32 civilians to 1 combatant ratio. Right now, even with Hamas's own numbers, it's closer to 1.2 to 1. And so I'm trying to figure out why you think, and when we look at what is comparable to Gaza, not, oh, Canada in this region that's residual rural area in the specific context of Afghanistan. No. We have to be comparable to the best of our ability. They're one of the lowest civilian to combatant death ratios that we've seen in urban warfare in modern times. So I'm trying to figure out why you think that the global average, by the way, is 5 to 7 to 1. Global, not Aleppo. In your opening statement, you said something about Russia. I think I may have misheard you. Did you say Russia was even worse or not as bad as Israel?
My claim is that Russia is close to Israel, but still probably better.
Okay, so when Russia
strike over the whole surface of Ukraine, I see a lot of concerns to limit to military objectives. There are places like there's a single town, I misremember the name.
Mariupol.
Mariupol. That place has got particularly destroyed. But
they killed more people in Mariupol in the first 25 days than all of Gaza in 2 years. And by the way, Mariupol only has a population of 440,000, where Gaza has a population of 2.1 million, give or take. So not only did they kill more people, at lowest estimates, they killed about half the amount of people in Gaza. According to Russia, they only killed 35,000. And by the way, this was almost exclusively civilians. But even if you want to go with the lowest estimate that Russia says, which obviously they're lying, but let's go with it. In 25 days, they killed half the population of the death toll in Gaza in 2 years in a place that has 1/5 of the population. What do you mean the Mariupol's the one outlier? It was almost the entire Gaza war in less than a month.
Well, I recognize that their behavior in Mariupol has been more destructive. However, I haven't seen women and children dying in crumbling buildings the way I've seen in Gaza, in Mariupol. I'd like to see it.
There's no videos
some,
out. They slaughtered all the people that didn't get displaced out, which the people that got displaced out, they weren't standing
and
around.
let's not forget, Mariupol was the last stand of a armed resistance. Mariupol was very different in that sense that the civilians had been largely evacuated, and the civilians that were staying there were largely involved in combat and in combat against the Russian forces.
No, well, that's incorrect.
They were part of the Azov battalion, right?
No, some of them were, but no, it's incorrect to say that this was the last resistance fight and they were almost exclusively military or militant groups. That's incorrect. That being said, the reason you said, you made a very good point, you haven't seen the same amount of videos. Again, most of them are displaced out, and those that stayed largely died. The only reason we have even some idea of testimony of the atrocities is there's some that stayed, and then as they were dying, there were some people that made it out, and their testimony said that everyone was killed. And there's satellite image that effectively debunks Russia's claim of only 35,000, and there's satellite image that they say it can go up at 70,000+. I've seen one source that said 110,000, again, just in 25 days. And so this idea, because you bring up a good point, why is it that we see so many more videos out of Gaza? It's night and day how many more videos we see out of Gaza than what we see out of Russia. And when we see the ones out of Russia, these are a lot of surprise attacks and people being slaughtered, and also a lot of war crimes. But interestingly enough, a lot of the times in Gaza, you see a camera that's pointed at a building, and it's like, why is it just pointing at this random building? And then you see the airstrike take out this building, and it's like, wait a minute. How is it that those people knew to put the camera right at that building at that exact time? Were they just randomly saying, I'm going to record this building? No, you know why? Because Israel has left over 1 million different text messages, phone calls, pamphlets, etc., telling people to leave out of this area. So you have somebody grab their phone, and then they come and they're just like, all right, they told us they're going to strike here. They click record, they post it on the internet, and people like you go, look at these videos I've seen. I haven't seen that out of Mariupol. Yeah, because they tell them where they're going to strike, so they get the videos.
Well, on Mariupol, I mean, the case that you're making is merely reinforcing my case, which is that Russia at this point in this city has acted maybe in a way that's as dirty as Israel, and that for the rest of the Ukraine war, they've acted in a cleaner way.
As dirty as Israel. It was up to 110,000, a quarter of the entire city in less than a month. The equivalent would be killing 500,000 Palestinians in 25 days. That would be the equivalent. How is it just as dirty?
Well, the thing is, when you talk in absolute numbers, you have to take into account that we're talking about societies that are bigger and societies that are more populated. The same way you've allowed the considerations of guerrilla warfare earlier in the debate. This is a false equivalency. The same way you've
that's why I said 500,000, because I don't understand if you know how the math, that's what I said 500,000 for, because it's equivalent. It's a higher population, so I raised the number. That's the point of why I said 500,000.
We're not going to get anywhere with counts. The problem is, the question is in terms of the following of the moral duties that relate to war when you have force. Is Israel behaving wrong? That is my question. And my question is not, is Russia sometimes behaving wrong? Because yes, they are. But that can be another debate. But the question, is Israel behaving in a way that is careless for human life? Yes. And
I want to point out, go ahead.
By the standards of developed societies, yes. And by those standards, by the way, Russia is also bad sometimes. But Israel is definitely bad.
Sometimes. Okay. The reason I want to point out, I was not bringing it up to change this topic. Trust me, I don't want to talk about Russia. I want to make it very clear. I brought it up because that was your example. I was debunking your point. I was not trying to say that we should talk about Russia. But yeah, so I did look it up while you were looking, just because I was curious. It says right here that the civilian versus multiple military casualties for Mariupol was 80,000, by far most of them being civilians. Early reports already showed huge civilian death tolls, including mostly women and children amongst the civilians. it says there's doctors here that reported treating 10 injured civilians for every 1 injured soldier. So even if we extrapolate that number, that would be about 90% civilian. So I just wanted to make sure people were clear about that.
Just to be clear, I don't think those methods are particularly reliable to ask for a doctor to judge whether he's healing a combatant or a non-combatant.
No, of course not. I'm not trying to say we should take it biblically, like this is gospel. I'm just simply saying the idea that you said it was a last stand and it was all or almost all militants or / military. I'm saying I don't think you have anything to go off of other than you just saying I don't believe this doctor, which fine, you don't have to believe him, but he would have to be severely off to try to make the claim that Mariupol was somehow military exclusively. But we don't have to talk about Russia. We can go back to Israel. What is it that you think, and I want you to be specific so that way we can actually dig deeper into the conversation. What specifically is it that Israel's doing that you do not see in terms of what you believe to be, and I'm not looking for individual examples because just like the US military, I believe there are individual soldiers and I believe they should be punished if they do something. And sometimes I believe Israel needs to do a better job at that punishment. We can agree on that, but we're talking about systemically here. We're not talking about individual soldiers, which a lot of them do get punished. Systemically, what is Israel doing that you find to be beyond the reasonable doubt of individual warfare? Because the death casualties, again, even if we're going with Hamas's numbers and the ratio, is actually better than the world average and definitely better than the regional average.
What they are doing is destroying and forcing a population outside of its place of living by either killing them through collateral damage or by destroying their places of living in a way that makes return almost impossible or very hard. So this carelessness of the treatment of the residential places is what I'm talking about.
Okay, how many military bases, infrastructure did Hamas have prior to October 7th?
Those are semantic issues. It's like...
They're not. And I'll explain why.
If I'm a Hamas warrior and I'm in an apartment and I have a gun and I'm looking at a window, does that become a military facility? Does that become a base? Yeah. So
no, not a base. No. I thought you were going to ask, does it become a legitimate target?
No, I'm not talking about legitimate targets. What I'm asking is, what does this semantic separation serve? Nothing. Because in the end, the point I'm making tonight is not about you should strike the Hamas base. I understand that we're talking guerrilla and we're talking very poor nation. But my point is you should be careful about the consequences of your violence, even if you want to target a legitimate target.
And my argument is that they have been careful based off of the numbers, even if we assume Hamas's numbers to be correct, which I'm already giving you the upper hand by taking Hamas's numbers and ratios. So my point is that you're saying, you just admitted right now, yes, it's okay to target, if it's a guerrilla warfare unit, to target things because they don't have military bases, but you have to be careful. I've effectively shown that they have been careful based off of the numbers from, and I'm not even using pro-Israel statistics here. I'm using Al Jazeera and Hamas just to make sure there's no question about like, well, those numbers might be wrong because Israel lies. I'm using Al Jazeera, funded by Qatar. I'm using Hamas. I am effectively have proven, unless you disagree with the numbers, then make the case, but I've effectively proven that they are targeting civilian areas because that's what Hamas uses, according to international law. And even if you want to throw international law out, if you just look at logic, of course you should target those areas after displacing the people. You don't want to do it while you haven't displaced the people because that would be genocide, right? You displace the people and of course you target those areas. Is it sad? Yes, but that's what you should do when militants like Hamas, PIJ, PRC, Army of Islam, Mujahideen Brigades, PFLP, DFLP, who have taken a spiderweb control over the entire Gaza Strip, you absolutely should level anything that they use because it's the military advantage versus the death of civilians, which is again what international law says. I have explained that. So if you don't agree, then tell me either one, why they should not hit any civilian areas, regardless of what the reason is, or if you think they should hit civilian areas but be more careful, tell me why my numbers or everything I've said is incorrect.
No, I mean, you're saying a lot of correct things. You point to international law allowing legitimate targets. That is correct. International law happens to be extremely exploitable to someone with bad intention. It's very easy to say, I'm going to bomb legitimate targets, but accidentally, I also destroyed the civilization and they can't come back now because I destroyed everything they had. In my view, we have to go beyond international law because international law has no value and no application. It's not even enforceable. We have to look at it from a moral standpoint and see the decision it is to use all of these AI targeting systems that tell them strike here, strike there, and that effectively are teaching. At this point, we have AI teaching the Israeli government. You can just raise an entire town by arguing that Hamas is here, Hamas is there, Hamas is there. I don't see a solid and serious investigation, a serious military targeting of Hamas. What I see is a bomb anything, and at some point, I bet there won't be any Hamas left.
So, don't judge me for my my map. I just drew a quick little Gaza, and I shaded in this area. This area represents Gaza City governorate, excuse me, because there's 5 governorates. There is North Gaza, Gaza, Deir al-Balah, Khan Yunis, and Rafah. If, let's say hypothetically, Hamas took that area I shaded in, and they built only military bases, infrastructure, there's no apartment buildings, no anything. They took that area and said it's only military, okay? If Israel were to, bear with my hypothetical, I promise you it'll make sense at the end.
I like hypotheticals. I'm following you.
Okay, good. If Israel were to have destroyed every single aspect of that governorate, right? But it's all military bases. If they were to have destroyed all of that, would you be against that?
If they were all military bases,
yeah,
and they were not populated by non-warriors.
Well, there might be resistance in there or not, but whatever you want to choose, you can say they're there. The question is,
who's in those bases? Are they women and children? Are they all fighters who want to destroy Israel? That's the question, ultimately.
That's up to Hamas, but that's up to them and the Palestinian people what they want to do with that. I'm just simply saying if it was military bases and it didn't look like an apartment complex.
But we're reaching the limit of your semantic distinction here, because I'm asking you, you want me to approve the bombing of all these buildings, okay? I'm asking you, are there innocents in those buildings?
Okay, so what you're saying is the only thing Hamas has to do to not get struck at all, if you were the leader of the world, is simply just tell women and children to stand there. And then from there, they can do whatever they want and you're not allowed to strike back. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying this. I'm saying that if they were to stand beside women and children, you inherit of a bigger responsibility of caring about your targeting and caring about the consequences of your actions.
Agreed. Like having a lower casualty ratio. You mean like that? Yeah, I agree 100%. Oh, wait, I already proven Israel's done that. Oh, okay. Do you mean like using explosives but not using
anything in terms of...
You disagree with the numbers?
It's not that I disagree with the numbers. It's that what I see in the actions of Israel and the results of them, I see way more human suffering than I'm comfortable morally approving. That's it. I see young children coming out of burning buildings and sometimes falling in the burning buildings. I see young children losing limbs. I see women who presumably were not involved in direct fight being killed. I see arbitrary sniping of people just walking around. That's enough to me to reach the conclusion that there is an unfair targeting of non-warriors, people who are not dangerous to Israel, people who are not terrorists, and they end up dying from the actions and the carelessness of Israel.
So it's enough for you to just get out more propaganda videos because, again, a lot of this stuff happens in warfare. That is true.
My question is not whether it's propaganda. My question is whether it's true. There are false videos, by the way, and I'm very careful at not misinterpreting them or not changing my views based on them. But there are real videos of suffering, and I've seen enough of it to have a judgment on Israel.
How many do you think you've seen? If you were, I know you don't know an exact number, but just generally speaking, like if you were to put the number of all the videos you've seen of burning children, limbs, the examples you gave, how many do you think you've seen if you were to give a liberal amount?
So I've been a streamer since 2017, watching basically the whole of the internet the more I can. I've probably seen violence videos of various wars in the 50,000
I was talking,
videos.
sorry, I was talking about the October 7th war.
So just to give you a scale,
Okay.
I've seen about the Gaza war. I've probably seen 1,000 video from it, and I've probably rejected 900 to 950 as uncertain or maybe AI generated or propaganda that was dishonest. But there are certain videos that we know can be verified, and I base mostly my judgment on them.
Okay, so about 50
down to 50, basically.
Okay, so 50. Let's double it just to be liberal here. Let's call it 100, right? 100 videos that you've seen that is verified in a population of 2.1 million. And I think we have agreed that in war, even war that you do relatively, at least average wise, good, because the argument right now is they do war bad, whatever that means, but you know, worse than the average what you see in warfare. So you're saying, again, being liberal here and saying instead of 50, let's call it 100. You've seen 100 videos in a population of 2.1 million, and you're saying that that's good enough for you to determine, because to me, that's a percentage of 0.00, I don't know, whatever, 1%. To me, that could easily be true based off of individuals, not systemic, because right now the argument is an individual IDF soldiers or even commanders or units have done things wrong. I would never make that argument because I was in the U.S. military, and although I think we are bound by a lot of the rules within our own standard operating procedures, and I'll tell you, it's very strict. I absolutely have heard of people in the Marines, I was in the Navy, or the Navy that have broken those rules. But if someone were to come to me and say it's systemically, like it was put into the rules system and operations, then I would make the argument. So I'm going to do the same thing with Israel. Everything you just described, even using liberal numbers, your own numbers, believing you, which I do believe you. I think that makes about a good amount of sense, what you said. That at very best for your argument shows individual/unit problems. But you're trying to make the argument that Israel is systemically doing this.
I've not used the word systemic. However, when you combine personal evidence of that kind, little videos, anecdotes, with results, because there's more than the individual suffering videos. We have the result of the Israeli war. We have the consequences. You can judge people by the consequences of their action. You can also judge by historical quoting, which is what I've been doing a lot tonight. Taken together, all this evidence points to a general carelessness in Israeli society as to the consequences on Arab lives of their war practices. And I don't think it's unfair to say from a collection of evidence that ranges from videos of suffering to civilizational result to political consequences up to historical descriptions of the plans and intents of Israeli leader. I think that altogether forms a fair judgment of the situation.
Perfect. So your argument makes sense, and it explains that what I've been trying to say. Because if you look at the results, and a lot of neighborhoods in Gaza have absolutely been destroyed, specifically places like Gaza City, Khan Yunis, and Rafah. And there's some places that have been relatively actually untouched, but we're not here to talk about that. When you look at the results and look at the actual number statistics, again, even using anti-Israel sourcing to believe those numbers just for the sake of it, right? Even when using that, you're left with two conclusions. You can come up with, I guess, the conclusion for some reason that you came up with, which is not that Israel's just destroyed buildings, but they've done it carelessly that has led to the death or casualties of innocent civilians, right? Or you can come with the conclusion that there has been destroyed areas, which I just admitted to, especially, like I said, Gaza City, Khan Yunis, Rafah. But when you look at the statistics that are actually relatively small, especially compared to other urban warfare conflict, then the conclusion naturally shows that they did have care. That doesn't mean you're not going to see 50 videos. I'm not arguing that at all. In fact, the standard to argue that for Israel, Canada, America, or any country would be the absolute dumbest thing to do in the whole world. It wouldn't even make any sense to do. So I agree with you. I believe you've seen 50 videos. I've seen a lot more than that. But it also shows that they did show care, because if they didn't, you wouldn't have saw 50 videos. And you said you've been doing this since 2017. You watch a lot of videos. I believe you've probably seen definitely more than the average Canadian. I've seen more than the average American for sure. We have that in common, but your entire premise just proved that they are showing care. Not maybe on an individual level. I'm sure there is IDF soldiers that have done something wrong. And if they have, I hope they get punished. I hope they get the book thrown at them. I'm not here to argue for those individuals. But again, you didn't use the word systemic, but you have argued systemic because you're talking about Israel. And not even Israel today, as you perfectly said. You said you're even bringing up historical. So you're using Israel from May 14th, 1948 to today. So you have been arguing systemically.
Well, if you want to take out of the urban warfare area to kind of generalize my case, I guess that would be my conclusion tonight. We can see the behavior in the Iran war. So we're talking here non-urban, or at least if the strikes are urban, they are strikes from the air. And in the Iran war, I see the same blatant carelessness of Israel in the way it has treated both their ally, the US, and Iran itself. This targeting of another sovereign nation, this decision that I'm going to assassinate a bunch of people because I don't like how they negotiate or how they manage their society. To me, it shows that there is a degree of blatantness in the Israeli behavior and a feeling of entitlement to control others that to me reveals itself even outside of urban warfare. So to me, the urban warfare argument is just a technicality of the Gaza war. The behavior of Israel in general is being rejected by the entire world, and the US with it these days. And to me, that's a judgment I'm prepared to make, even if we leave the Gaza question aside.
Yeah, so this is called the appeal to popularity fallacy, so I'm just going to reject that, but I will answer your point on Iran. So you said, maybe I misheard you, you said that they decided to attack Iran because they don't like the way they negotiate or run their society. So what does negotiations have to do with Hezbollah attacks, Hamas, PIJ, Houthis? Even when you bring in America, in the past 2 years, they've slaughtered about 50 Americans, give or take, in just the past 2 years alone. We don't even have to go back to 79 with the hostages that they held for over a year, or the Beirut bombing, although those are correct too, but even just the past 2 years. What are you talking about? That's not negotiations. That's attempted assassinations on the President of the United States. One that was just, as I'm sure you know, convicted.
This one I reject.
He was just convicted. What are you talking about?
I reject this. I reject this one.
He admitted it was because of...
But
okay,
he doesn't
go ahead.
know.
Tell me why.
He doesn't know what he's saying. It's not
you know
because
that
someone...
personally? You actually talked to him?
No, no, precisely, and that's why I'm more informed, because I didn't talk to a delusional person. So that makes me more informed by not talking.
So the courts, everyone got it wrong. The courts got it wrong. His testimony's wrong.
The courts have got nothing.
So wait, hold on. I just want to make sure. So him admitting it was wrong, he lied, or he's what, a crazy person?
Maybe he's a crazy person. What do you think about?
I don't want maybe. No. I don't want maybe.
Are there crazy people? Are there crazy people?
No,
is that unrealistic?
You made a claim. I don't want maybe.
No, I didn't make a claim. I rejected your claim. I rejected
exactly.
Your claim.
But your claim was that he's a crazy, or sorry, you said delusional person. That was your claim. And now you're saying maybe he is. I don't want maybe. Your point was that he is delusional. Go ahead, explain. I'm all ears.
Yeah, so he says by drawing on a piece of paper in a court proceeding, he draws on a piece of paper and he says, here's a square and here's a scene, a kind of concert of music or whatever that I was at, and I spoke to a member of the Iranian leadership and they told me to go kill Trump. That is not a credible story, especially as it arrives exactly as there is demand in the American media to justify the strikes against Iran. This guy is arriving exactly at the time where Trump needs a red flag that says Iran has tried to kill me. They tried saying this even before this guy started making these claims. They claimed this first with the other assassins of Trump, for which there is absolutely no evidence of Iranian engagement. The fact that this guy showed so late and started claiming this on the basis of a discussion on which there is no record to me has zero credibility. And yes, I dismiss it as a delusion or as a lie. Maybe he's not deluded. Maybe he's a liar, but I don't believe it.
Okay, well, it doesn't really matter if you believe it or not, but for the sake of moving on with with the, I'm pretty sure Iran actually admitted to him being a Iranian intelligence agent, but I'm gonna put it aside so we can move forward the conversation because everything else I mentioned still very much holds water. So if you want to say that all of that is just a lie because you don't personally believe it, which I'm looking at the case notes right now, it's a lot more than him just drawing on a piece of paper. So I don't think you've read the case notes, but okay, fine, whatever. Let's put that one aside. What about everything else I just mentioned? Because to be fair, your argument was that they attack them because they don't like the way they negotiate, even though that is a gross misrepresentation. As if all Iran did was just negotiate badly and slaughter tens of thousands of their own people. But, you know, that's their problem, I guess.
I guess the history of the US and Israel and Iran for the last 40 years has been a dissatisfaction with Iranian leadership and a desire for replacement that at times has expressed itself in regime change attempts. In fact, Trump has described his strikes and his assassination of Iran's leadership as, well, we didn't like how they were negotiating, so we're getting the next wave, and we killed the second wave too. Those are things that Trump has said.
Yeah, he said that in the context of this war. He's saying specifically after the war had already started, but that's not what you said originally. You're saying that the reason they started the war.
No, that was what I was referring to. Those were the comments I was referring to.
No, that was when he said they didn't like how they're negotiating after the first strikes. I'm talking about what made them even do the strikes on February 28th. You're saying it was solely because they just didn't like how they were negotiating? That's it? Nothing else?
I think it's trauma here. My point has been that Iran has been struck and has had his leadership assassinated because of Trump not being able to obtain and Israel not being able to obtain a control over their sovereignty, over their nuclear sovereignty, whatever you want to call it, or their economic sovereignty, everything that US and Israel are demanding of Iran. The reason they got assassinated is that Iran was too harsh of a negotiator and that they didn't give them what they wanted. This shouldn't happen. This is unfair. No. Yes.
No, but you're leaving out the point that the negotiation they didn't like is that they didn't want to do anything at all with their ballistic missiles program, which they have used not just for themselves, but have sent to their proxy groups to kill Americans and Israelis. You are leaving out. It's not like they just didn't like that they negotiated. Hey, I want to give you an interest loan. What percentage would you like? Like, we're talking about the negotiations of creating ballistic missiles, not just for themselves. Operation Cassandra in 2008, where they found that IRGC proxy groups are going into the Western Hemisphere, getting passports, so that way they can actually get into the United States. Like, they're not negotiating percentages here, and they didn't like how they negotiated. We're talking about the killing of Americans and Israelis.
Those are the negotiations.
I just want to jump in. So sorry. Very shortly, we should probably go into the Q&A. I'll give you a chance to respond, JF.
All right, just yes, those are the things that they were miscontent about. Now notice that in those negotiations, Israel is demanding that Iran unilaterally disarms. There's no recognition by Israel that, hey, maybe our nuclear bombs, maybe the Iranians wouldn't want us to have those bombs. So there is a asymmetric treatment, asymmetric moral treatment of the other side.
That doesn't matter. That it doesn't.
It matters to me.
Well, hey, by all means, feel free to be offended by that. But we are a more powerful nation. We are the stronger nation, and absolutely, we are the world police of the United States. You can say you personally don't like it. Okay, I don't particularly give a shit, and also I don't give a shit what I personally believe. We're here to argue about if it makes sense or not here to argue our feelings and argue what we personally believe. And so I'll just end with this. You can say you don't like that America has nukes, that Israel has them, maybe, wink, wink, no, I'm just kidding, right? We can say that all day, but it doesn't matter, right? It was disingenuous to frame it as they just didn't like how they were negotiating. Iran has been attacking Americans and Israelis since 1979. This is not disputed, and it's the start of their Islamic revolution. And yes, they've been oppressing their own people, but we're not here to argue about that.
I would say in conclusion, vice versa. What you just said about Iran attacking the people of Israel and the US can also be said in reverse. Iran has had its sovereignty under attack by the US and by Israel for a long time.
Yeah, and they would be more than they can do something about that if they wanted to, but that's not the argument. The argument is that you believe that they only did the war on February 28th, started the war because they just didn't like the negotiation terms. Or no, not even that. You said how they negotiated. That is not right. But to sit here and say, well, America's done it too. Okay, sure, yeah, but I don't care. That's not the argument.
People will be able to rewind what I actually said, which is they assassinated a negotiator because they didn't like the way he negotiated. And that's what I believe.
Yes. Okay, we can get to the Q&A. I think
this might be a good opportunity to jump into it as we have many questions. Folks have enjoyed this debate immensely. And folks, you can find both of our guests linked in the description box. You can even click their hyperlinks in the title. You can also find them in the description box of the podcast, as all the debates end up on the podcast. And you can find both Nick and JF's link in the description box at the podcast. We're going to jump right into these questions. Thank you very much. Some of them are more comments, but that's okay. Jared Ferguson says, you got this, Nick. And Miguel Santiago says, for both, what principle matters more to you in this conflict? Historical justice, human rights in the present, or long-term peace? And how do you prioritize them when they conflict?
I don't have much of a dog in this conflict. What I am mostly is an observer, and I'm an observer of Israel's behavior. I'm fascinated by the greed of it, the military greed of it. To me, it's more like I'm a biologist and I'm observing a population of weird birds.
For me, I would say that, I'm not Jewish, I'm not Israeli, I'm not Arab, I'm not Muslim, so it's, I guess in some way there's that too. But what I would say is that I guess if I had to choose out of those three, probably lasting, I'll add it on to you. I'll say lasting peace, but also lasting security. This two-state delusion and keeping to the status quo is what people say because it makes them feel better and they think they're part of the popular, majority. Like, oh, other people agree with me, so I must be right. It's a delusion and it doesn't actually lead to security. It leads to conflict. I brought up earlier, we didn't get into it much, about the UPJ principle, which is the idea that when a new forming state, regardless of what it is, Israel or anything else, when it forms, you keep onto the boundaries of the prior entity. By that logic, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea would have been the boundaries of Israel, right? But Jordan ends up illegally annexing Judea and Samaria, Gaza goes to Egypt, and they illegally occupy it. And so this idea, the reason I bring it up is because the whole reason that customary international law exists is to avoid exactly what JF is saying is a problem, which I agree with a lot of the stuff, even though we disagree on the specifics, that there is a lot of problems. And the reason is because of people like him and other people that are trying to continue this idea of a status quo.
This one from Deborah Leonelli says, oh, wow, call an ambulance for that JF person. JF's heard way worse smack talk. JF invented the blood sports.
You guys are amateurs.
He was born in the blood sports. RS Sid says, game started by America, Israel to secure petrodollars. China, Russia was watching. Palestine was just step. China corridor, quote, Rush, Chai, Iran, do homework.
I'll just say, in general, the petrodollar is an instrument of enslavement and it's illegitimate. People tend to think of it as an American thing. I think of it as mostly an Israeli thing, and how Israeli agents ultimately benefit from it through the inflation system that it ties with the Fed and the USD. But in any case, it's illegitimate, whoever wages it.
You got it. This one from Pseudonym says, to Nick, is it implicit bias to say Israel should have the money to defend itself, or does it have to borrow money from the other nations? That was you, Joe.
Yeah, so actually, I'm not like a lot of pro-Israel people. I think that, and I like that Benjamin Netanyahu wants to pull out of the MOU funding that America, the 3.8 billion, which 500 million is direct funding, 3.3 billion is kind of more of a credit system, if you will. I'm glad that Israel wants to actually pull out of that. And I think that once it expires, we should stop actually supplying that. Not out of a place of hate for Israel. It's because Israel, I actually want to see apply its sovereignty even more. And unfortunately, it may work with some administrations like President Trump better, not perfectly. But when you had President Biden before, he waved that in front of Israel and said, you better not do this or we're not going to send this. And I just don't think that's how any allyship or MOU deal or anything should act. So I'd like to see more actually out of Israel because we forced them to buy our munitions that they could actually probably build themselves and maybe even make better. So, you know, sorry not to give you the typical pro-Israel answer, but I think we should actually pull out of that funding, and I think Israel will be just fine. And we should start creating trades and deals with Israel that will help their economy and come back into us and actually have that kind of partnership.
So from Knuckle Dragging Neanderthal says, sorry, Nick, Israel lost my support for life. We all see what's happening, and I've heard every side endless times. They're damned forever in my book.
Okay, emotional argument rejected.
RS Sid says, reality is far from guys thinking. Funny clowns. I don't always know what these mean.
Is this normal for your super chat?
We read everything here. From E says, genocide requires intent, genius.
Yeah, well, that's a trick. It's a trick that has been inserted in the law, and it's ridiculous. Like, are you telling me that you wouldn't care if an entire people was genocided, but accidentally? Like, I can't take this argument seriously.
You can't accidentally genocide an entire people.
Exactly. So it's a semantic trick around intent, which does not matter. The super chatter is highlighting this, but it doesn't matter. The killing of massive amounts of people is wrong, even if you did not intend it.
Right, it would be wrong because it'd be a war crime probably, but that's not what genocide means. You're using an exaggerated word to try to apply to something else.
I haven't even yet used it. I'm answering the super chat.
Fair enough, fair enough.
So from Official Tism says, I'd like to thank the channel for having Nick on as well as Mr. Matau. Is this some sort of meme that you guys have going?
Well, my last name is Matau. I didn't really...
What
did he say? As Mr. Matau?
They said, thank you for having Nick as well as Mr. Matau. Some sort of joke. I don't get it.
You know what? I'm on the spectrum, so I'm probably, it probably is a joke, and I'm not getting it.
I don't know what's going on. Amir Cricket says, for JF, little Tatey Bear, you just have to feel close to something. E says, what the F happened in society that caused so many people to appeal so much to emotion? I don't say who that's for.
I'm a moral nihilist, and I don't believe that there's anything else than your subjective view when the question of morality is raised. There is no objective morality. So you frame it as emotion in your super chat, but I would say there is more than emotion to moral judgment. There is a rational way you can decide this is right, this is wrong, independent of emotional triggers.
This one coming in from, do appreciate it. Pseudonym says, Nick, are Christians obligated to support Israel? Wouldn't Christians say based on morals and the Bible, they're unsaved anyways? Retail your claim because it's not political.
Okay, well, first off, my claims are political. I'm not a Christian. I am a cradle Catholic. And I've read the Christian Bible. I've read the Quran twice. I've read the Christian Bible probably 4 times, different versions. I've read the Tanakh. I've read tens of thousands of hadiths. Anyways, to answer your question, it's hard to answer because you're saying obligated to. I don't think Christians are obligated to do anything. There's over 10,000 denominations of Christianity, and each one will give a different answer. I'm not here to be the rule on what Christians are obligated to do. You do what you think is best for Christianity. As for saying they are damned regardless, I think you should read the book of Romans written by Paul. I don't want to give more time because I know you have a lot of super chats, but I can talk about that more if you want.
This one from, do appreciate it. The real SAU says, Jew bad, Israel bad, war bad, but Putin and Russia good. Me Catholic, me real Jew, me not real French, me tape of meatball.
Nice try, but I didn't say that Russia was good. That's where you fail.
This one, Maryland, okay, says we're all God because of God and everything should be free, but it's definitely the Jews. Jared
That's
Ferguson
probably
says,
true.
Nick asked him about his thought on women and children that go missing in cold cases. I guess we'll give you a chance to clear the air, JF, if you want.
I have not killed my ex-wife.
What?
So they're accusing me of murdering my ex.
Is that a
But
thing?
I didn't. No. Yeah, it's a thing on the internet, but I didn't do it.
Oh, all right.
It is an internet thing, which, you know, I was like,
You know
this
what? I
one,
resigned my offer to get coffee. No, I'm just kidding.
RS SID says little knowledge, very dangerous. Okay. The real SAU says whites fight wars very good in all caps. And they also said, as a proud Christian Lebanese person who fully supports Israel, there's no such thing as a Palestinian. They're just Arabs like me.
Factual.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
And Pseudonym says, I'm absolutely confused. Nick changed sides. I don't know
What?
about that. RS. And jump in if you want to say anything. Otherwise, if it's confusing, I'm just going to move. RS Sid says, both of them, my breakfast on reality facts today. Okay. Summer, good to see you. Says to both debaters, what kind of event, in your view, would have to happen for Israel to be majorly reined in from where they are now? Will we ever get back to a balanced foreign policy in the Middle East a la JFK and earlier?
I think a nuclear bomb onto Israel might send them back a little bit and might discipline them. Or if a presidency in America was to rise with an anti-Israel attitude, perhaps they would be reined in. But other than this, I see them continuing their blatant disregard for human life.
Are you saying that they should be nuclear bombed, or are you just saying that
No,
that
I'm
would
not
bring them
saying
in?
they should be. I'm saying that factually, it would result in them calming down a little bit. When you get the alpha radiation sifting through your body, it kind of settles you down a little bit.
Well,
You become
the gamma radiation would be definitely much more strong in, and
yeah.
sure, alpha. Hopefully, you never get a neutron inside of you. I'm sorry, I'm a nuclear engineer. I had to add that in. But anyways, okay. So, what would rein them in? I thought you were asking what do they need to do to be reined in. I was gonna say if they did any of the stuff that JF accused them of today and it was actually proven without using emotion, then that would rein them in. But if I'm answering like JF, like what would literally rein them in? Yeah, I guess an American president that was anti-Israel and pulled out of any support of them.
This one from Do Appreciate It. Officialism says W's in the chat for Nick. Pseudonym says JF1 because Nick used AI. Let's go. Cav
I used
Kazit
AI. Right.
says, when Jordan controlled the West Bank, the Palestine Liberation Organization said that the West Bank is not part of Palestine, lol.
Correct. It was even after it was Zoran. It was Zerain. God, what the heck's his name? Anyways, I can look it up after and I'll put it in the Zoom chat. But he was part of the PLO, one of the military leaders in 1977. He said to the Trout, I believe it was called, it was a Danish paper actually, that there's no such thing as a Palestinian people. And once we actually gain control of Palestine, we will not wait but 1 minute to actually reconnect it with the Arab world, or maybe he said Jordan. So that's true. They did say that. Mohsen, Mohsen, I think his name was. Let me look it up.
This one from Mo the Goat says, if you are a moralist, how can you support the Palestinians while they kidnap, built tunnels under homes, launched rockets daily, and question, if you are a pure moralist, why are you not also anti-Palestine?
I don't take much position on Palestine. I could, but the reason I don't is that everyone already gets the media part that tells you Hamas evil. So I specialized in edgy media that takes the contrarian position. But I don't particularly respect or even defend Palestinians or Arabs in general. It's just that I specialize in criticizing a very powerful elite that typically doesn't get criticized.
You got it. This one from
Separate, I just want to say it was Zuhair Mohsin was his name. Sorry. Go ahead.
This one from Bronca22. Thank you for your kind words. Dogs Domain says the issue with the genocide question is that it presumes states have unified intents as opposed to being diffuse.
I'm not really sure, but I will kind of push back on that a little bit. It's not necessarily states, because when you look at genocide, it comes from, there's 4 levels of hierarchy in international law. The top of it is by far just Kogan's norms, which is peremptory norms. And that's where genocide would fall into, amongst other things. And then you have, I think, what, Article 107 of the UN Charter. And then you have next level down would be treaty law, and then contemporary international law, customary. And that kind of works together. But just Kogan's norms, what separates it is that everyone is applicable to it, regardless if you're a member or not, whether you're a state or not. One of the things in just Kogan's norms actually is the use of cluster munitions in populated areas. So the Houthis actually violated that, even though Houthis are not part of a state. Technically, they're not a member, because it's part of peremptory norms. They're still in violation of that international law. So that would apply to here.
This one from Michael Feldman says, does JF believe in a Kurdistan carved out of Turkey or a Druze state carved out of Syria?
I have no dog, and I just believe in self-determination.
Well, they're not asking about self-determination. They're asking about a sovereign state. It's different.
Yeah, well, I don't have a position on these particular regions.
This one from...
You have a position on Israel-Palestine, though?
I do.
Okay. All right.
Billy Moses says, here's some jizya. Thank you. Dogs Domain says, a better model is to imagine Israel as having competing internal factions with their own incentives pushing them in the direction of genocidal, quote unquote, actions. That explains why they don't just glass Gaza.
I agree more with JF, actually, on why they don't just glass Gaza, if that was their intent to do, but I guess that's an interesting point of view.
Bronca22 says, drift is just another sneako, embarrassing. What's drift? Sommer says, JF Gariépy, if you're a petty nationalist, how do you judge the fact that any established state will have subgroups that may in turn wish to create their own state ad infinitum? Racial/ethnic boundaries being blurry exacerbates this.
I believe in the right of people to self-segregate. And so a nation has the responsibility to treat that subpopulation with respect, dignity, and eventually to respect their sovereignty of separating if they want to.
You got it. This one from The Lion says, hey, JF, what makes the Palestinian refugees more important than all the other refugees in the world? Why do we not talk about them?
They're not more important in my view. I comment on all sorts of events across the world. This one is just one of them. This one is particularly interesting, the Israel-Gaza situation, because there is such a control over American politics by Israeli interests. To me, that's what's most important about it. You were talking about Turkey and other places. I don't give a shit about Turkey, because there aren't that many billionaire Turkish people controlling our entire infrastructure, institutions, media, banks, and what have you. I care about Israel because they have this.
Go ahead.
Real quick, I just want to ask, are you talking about the Rothschild banking theory?
That's just a fraction of it.
Is that a major fraction?
Well, the Rothschilds are one family of Jews that had a lot of power. I was friends with one of them, Jeff Epstein.
Yeah. So you agree that, well, that explains some things, but okay. You agree that they don't really have that power anymore, and the Rothschilds banking system almost exclusively today is administration and actually just helping other people with logistics and coaching. You said Israel controls the banking system. Like, what are you talking about?
You will not understand the state of America as it stands if you deny the fact that Jewish power is continued from these families and has been inherited by replacements. which are still very much present in various fields. I was in many of these fields, as it turns out. I've been both an academic and a media person, and in both fields, I can tell you, you're going to eat the Jewish potato latkes, and you're going to celebrate the 7 candles.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I know we can move on because I know you have super chats, but I just want to say real quick, I have studied this actually extensively, and I do believe Jews are in a lot of position of power based off of their very highly intelligent people, and they obviously do have some generational things that have been passed down, and they're really good at that. But your question, your argument was control of the system. I would love to debate that one day because I've studied that extensively.
We can plan a debate for the future. But you just acknowledge, as far as I'm concerned, what I just said.
No, it's disproportionate completely, but it's fine. Whatever. Let's move on.
Sommer says to both debaters, should U.S. Christians abandon dispensationalism? To me, it creates both theological and pragmatic problems for virtually no gain.
What?
Not sure I understand the question.
Let's see, dispensation.
Can you just read it one more time, maybe?
Yeah, they said, should U.S. Christians abandon dispensationalism? To me, it creates.
Oh, that's replacement theology.
You got.
I don't have a position.
Again, I'm not here to tell Christians what to do, so I'm not going to say they should abandon it. But I could debate somebody on replacement theology, but I just don't particularly care because it's just if a Christian wants to do that, go for it. As long as you're not using it for a extreme amount of hate to like place out a separate people, whether it's Jew, Gentile, or whoever, whatever. It's your opinion.
Dog's Domain says the civilian death ratio is 75 to 85% in Gaza.
The what ratio? I'm sorry?
Civilian death ratio.
Oh, no. So where this comes from was actually a Cradle article that they, by the way, have deleted. And they said it was actually from a Harvard study, which was a lie. It actually never came from a Harvard study. It was on a Harvard database, which anyone can sign up to. In fact, I've had for years now, and I'm not a Harvard grad. I've had for years now, I'm in that database and I can, if I wanted to, post any study. And what actually ended up happening was they took someone else's actual study that was talking about the GHF zones. And there was 3 major zones that they put into a certain population of those zones while ignoring the rest of Gaza. Not on purpose, it's just real quick. Anyways, and then what they did was that they started to take a percentage, or sorry, it came from a leaked database, IDF database, which, by the way, never was produced by the guy. His name was Abraham. I can't remember. He's actually an Israeli Jew himself. Anyways, he said that 6,900, if I remember correctly, people were killed that were identified by name. And then he extrapolated, I think it was at the time, 53,000 total deaths. So he came up with, it wasn't 75 to 85. I don't know what that super chat's talking about. It was 83% specifically. But what happened was, he only counted Hamas and PIJ, no other terrorist organizations. And on top of that, he only counted those that actually had a name. And he ignored, and he, by the way, he admitted to this on his X that he was being disingenuous. He like admitted it. He ignored everyone that was not named at all. So all he did was take those that were named, right? And then he assumed everyone else was a civilian. Also, anyone that was a political Hamas side, he also assumed was a civilian automatically. And so that's how he came to that 83%. And the study ended up getting effectively deleted. And he admitted that it wasn't, it was disingenuous. That's where he gets it from.
You got it. This one from the Lion says, hey, JF, what? Got that one. Sommer, we got that. Dogs Domain says, Mo the Goat says, isn't choosing to stay in area that Israel told you is attacking will lead to death? Consequences. Why does he not judge them in that?
What?
I don't know. What was the beginning of the question again?
They said, isn't choosing to stay in an area that Israel told you is attacking will lead to death?
Well, my position on this is that someone has the right to stay where they live. And they should not be thinking, oh, I have to leave to not die. They should be able to stand there and die if they are being targeted by injustice, which is what a lot of Palestinians have been doing.
Wait, you just said stand there and die? Wait, do you apply that no matter what? If If like a hurricane were to come and it's going to wipe out your neighborhood and you're like, this is my house, I want to stay, and you die, are you saying?
If they are targeted by injustice, sometimes they may choose to martyr themselves effectively.
Wait, that's circular. Wait, that's circular reasoning. You're saying it's injustice because of the civilian death toll, but then you just said the civilian death toll is there because of the injustice, so they're staying there to be martyred, which increases the injustice.
The injustice to begin with is that the state is trying to deprive you of your place of living. And you can choose to make a statement. There's a lot of cases of martyrs in history who choose to make a statement by dying in place. And it's very present in the Arab culture.
So Israel targeting where Hamas fights, where the tunnels are, they shouldn't do that because it's going to destroy buildings that are civilian buildings. And if they do that, then people are going to make a statement by dying. And then you get to say, look at the death toll numbers. But the death toll numbers is you're using circular reasoning because they're staying there to die.
Bringing the death toll number. I haven't brought it up tonight.
Oh, what do you think the death toll number is?
I haven't brought it up because I don't care. I care about the war practices and what they show about the behavior and psychology of the Israelis. And what I see is practices of barbarism.
This one, Kristen F says, Dr. JF, brilliant war genius, are you upset that Hamas men hide behind innocent women and children instead of putting together a functioning government for them?
Are typical dehumanizing arguments where those are developed as justifications to justify what Israel is doing. They're making this human shield argument. I absolutely dismiss it. It's a psyop, and it's meant to justify down the line the barbaric actions that I've been denunciating.
Do you believe that they use human shields?
Again, we are always in the semantics with you. Because if they were to use human shields, you would still have to acknowledge that these human shields have not done anything to deserve it. You would then have to consider them as hostages. And therefore, it would still be correct. My argument would still be in place that the actions of the Israelis are wrong. Whether they're human shields or not changes nothing to this question.
Oh, of course it does, because human shields, yes, I agree. You need to, as you pointed out earlier, the attack must have the military advantage above the civilian casualties. And so that's how it describes the numbers. I get you said you didn't give a death toll number, but you also said you don't care, which is laughable because it matters. Because if the death toll numbers were very high, then your argument would actually make a lot of sense. I'd be the first in line to agree with you. But if the numbers, again, using an anti-Israel source, are what they are, because you're not willing to give a death toll number, so I'm going to use the one that's recognized by OCHA, even though they haven't independently verified it, they're getting it from Hamas. We have to use that. Then your argument falls apart because that shows they are showing care. That doesn't mean zero civilians are going to die, but it shows that with 200,000 tons of explosives, however many bullets, over 500,000, and that the death toll is still about a 1.2 to 1 ratio, and it's at 70,000 or whatever it is you think. No, wait, you said you don't care. It doesn't matter. Yeah, that shows they did show care. That's the whole point.
If you care that much about a number, I'm pretty positive that within the last, since 1948, there has been more than 1 million people displaced by these actions, and very probably more than hundreds of thousands of victims, innocent victims, from these actions of the Israeli state against the Palestinian. I think it's a ballpark. Yes.
In Palestine or the Palestinian territory, is that what you're talking about? Or am I...
The whole of Palestine since 1948.
Yeah, there's definitely not been hundreds of thousands. Even if you were to count all of it from 1948 to today, it wouldn't get up there unless you believe the Gaza war is way more than 70,000, which I don't know if you think so or not. You have
to take into account the starvation tactics, the displacement that lead to death, and the bombings. I think you're restricting your count to really just acts of violence. I see it as a broader issue of the treatment of this population.
Okay.
This one, by the way, folks, early bird tickets for DebateCon 8 go away tonight at midnight. In other words, in 45 minutes, they will be going away. So get your tickets if you haven't yet. Kristen F says, we got that. Eric B says, I will be starting another GoFundMe for Nick's legal fees because Nick just unalived JF. This one from Cav Kazib says, Hey, has you ever been far, even as decided to want or do more like? That's really
You
what it
guys have to
says.
learn to write if you want to communicate with us. Write your super chats better.
This one, yeah, that was one of the Mo the Goat says, I am observe of Israel behavior. You don't have part of this fight. Okay, doctor, you take
Yes,
side. You judge
Dr. J.
Israel with selective morals.
Wait, are you a doctor?
Of course.
Oh, I didn't know that. Of what?
I'm a doctor of neuroscience, and I'm the author
Ah.
of The Revolutionary Phenotype, the amazing story of how life begins and how it ends.
Huh. Nice.
Doctor. Only from Duke. But
Not that kind of doctor.
this one from OC Pet Doctor says, Dr. JF, does Israel have a right to exist?
Right to exist to me is, again, a semantic construct. It doesn't mean anything. You exist if you claim your existence against the forces of entropy and violence. You can exist or you cannot exist. And then your existence may be tied to violations of other people's right to exist or not. There is no such thing as a right to exist. No one will be there to honor it for you. So Israel is claiming its right to exist in a specific place, Israel, and it's claiming it against the existence of others and in violation of their right to exist. That is the moral question to me.
This is from Jonathan. And by the way, folks, please no more questions as we want to get these guys out of here by a decent time. Jonathan says, Nick argues from a position based on technicalities, semantics, and context-dependent data. JF argues from a higher level of abstraction. It feels like Nick wouldn't engage in the morality conversation. What does JF think?
Yeah, I agree. I think that I've destabilized Nick a little bit, but I think he's an intelligent guy, and maybe in a future debate, he can reconnect to my point a little more now that he's more
No,
familiar with it.
yeah, like I said, emotional arguments. That's what you're saying when you're saying morality. First off, I did argue morality and international law. I argued both points, so you're just not listening. And second, it's an emotional argument. When you say semantics, first off, semantics literally means the study of meaning, right? So that's important. If your argument right now in the super chat is, oh, Nick uses context-based statistics. Oh, yes. How dare I use statistics and factual information to debunk the idea of all of the claims that he made? Of course, that's important. If you're saying it's context-based, yes, that's the point. That's the point of bringing it up because it is context-based. That's the point.
This one from E. Which Walmart did you get your degree from? And Sagi, the JF laughs at these. All right. Sagi Dane Shavar says, Iranian here. Iran's state TV admitted to being behind Trump's assassination attempt. They said, quote, next time we won't miss.
Oh, well, I don't take these admissions of bravado as fact.
I mean, it was on their state TV. It's not like it's okay. Whatever.
This one from, they say, don't forget to unsubscribe from the loser. Well, at least spell loser, right? All right, Ephras, what do you think about the genocide in Nigeria or Sudan?
I think genocide is wrong generally.
Agreed.
This one from Strawberry Guy says, hey, coaches, TikTok chat, it's Boopity. My question is for JF. Since your stance is based solely on your opinion of morality, why is it more important than anyone else's that may be opposite?
Well, we are public speakers. We make a case, and a moral case will never be factual, precisely because of the Hume distinction between facts and morality. Ultimately, there is never a fact that will tell you how you have to think morally. I am a public speaker who makes a case for a moral angle. There are other public speakers, they make other cases for their angle. All I ask is for you to consider that angle and that lens. The rest of the media will give you generally the opposite lens.
I mean, I agree that somewhat. I've been doing debate for more of my life than I haven't been, and the problem with this, and this also goes back to the last super note or super chat against me about, the morality argument. You can make a morality argument, but you fail to make the one most important thing that you learn in even freshman level debate is you make the morality argument, and then you make the biggest question, which is called the so what, and that was not really here today. The best thing you said was, well, that's my opinion. In fact, that's a quote from you. And you also refuse to actually get much deeper. And so if you go the morality route, which I've done in debates before, not a lot, but I try it sometimes, you have to answer the so what. And that was,
Let me
I feel like,
amend my error, my objective error then. So what? So we should say to Israel, fuck off. And we won't give you money anymore, and you're not our ally anymore. That's the so what.
No, the so what in debate means in a specific argument, like let's say ethnic cleansing. The so what is why is ethnic cleansing more wrong than let's say security? Not so what, like so what will you do? But that's all right.
Oh, you're right. I rely on the assumption that most people are against these actions.
You could be against something and still see it as not a good argument.
This one from where was this? LeBron. Ilmateka Adam says, LeBron James or Michael Jordan, who's the GOAT?
Michael Jordan.
I have no position.
No opinion. All right. Cars in Depth says, is Jew hatred systemic in European culture?
Hatred is not the right word, but there is a innate resistance to subversion of societies, and there is definitely a schism between Christianity and Judaism in certain traditions of Christianity.
Mo the Goat says, so they choose to die. Why is it Israel's fault?
I think that was in response. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's like someone who says, I stand my ground even if I know I will be victimized. It's still the fault of the person sending the bomb for doing it.
You still feel that way if they're like inside of a building in Israel, just like any other country doesn't have X-ray vision? They have some intelligence, of course, but it's not going to be perfect. If they say that our intelligence states that people have moved to the Al-Mawasi zone, the thing that you didn't know about earlier, but I was explaining to you, then like, if there's some civilians that are left over in that building and Israel doesn't know,
to me, when you're capable of developing a weapon or waging a weapon, you should have enough intelligence to know the risks of what you do. And to me, it's not a question of whether they have X-ray vision or know that there are victims. I think it's very obvious. You can tell that the actions that they take will result in a lot of casualties.
Okay, I guess if we go with risk, then you shouldn't ever do anything, really.
Well, risk has to be part of your considerations if you're intelligent enough to take it into account.
I agree with that.
This one from, do appreciate your question. Michael Feldman says, old U.S. Army joke, a moderate Muslim is shitting his pants unarmed, outnumbered, with no kids to hide behind, and out of ammo.
I don't get it.
It's a human shield joke. Very poorly stated.
E says, your degree is a, quote, semantic concept. Ariel Cooper says, can we get back to JF's relationship with Epstein? We have to do this every debate.
Epstein was a great friend of mine. He was sending me money, and I'm so sad that he's gone now. I can't believe they got him.
Are you trolling me right now? I don't understand.
No, I'm not trolling. I tried approaching Jeff Epstein back in 2015 when 2013 when my career started as a media personality, and he sent me a big check. He sent me $25,000 just by the mail. I was like, wow, this guy is great.
Did he send you an invite to an island?
Basically, the envelope was coming from his island, and I knew that he had some problem with sex. And I thought I will become his friend and I will convince him to marry a woman and to have a family. But I couldn't get
by some problem of sex, you mean pedophilia, right?
Well, pedophilia, ebephilia, we can play about. You're always in the semantics. You're always right there at trying
I think
to
that's an
choose the
important
label.
semantic to bring up. It's not a sex problem. It's sex with minors. That's
Yeah,
you don't
well,
think that's important to distinguish? You guys can't just use. I gotta say this real quick. You can't just always say semantics to get out of arguments. Everyone does that. It's such a weak argument.
Precisely, it's important, but it's important we choose the right words also.
Isn't that semantics? Wait, isn't that semantics?
No, but it's important we choose the right word to describe the facts, but we have to have a discussion about the facts first. By the way, I'm not defending Jeff Epstein. I know it's hilarious. Sometimes I do it as a joke. I think that Jeff Epstein maybe had these problems that that he's been accused of, and I wanted to fix them. Back then, though, I didn't know that he was having sex with minors. Back then, I thought that he was just having those Me Too moments with women. But I was like, let's make him a serious guy with a single wife. But I couldn't get to him. They took him and they put him in jail and he killed himself.
So you were close to Epstein in the sense that he at least wrote you a check. You asked him for a grant. He gave it. That's all you know, though. You don't do you have any information?
I never saw him physically.
Okay.
So I'm mostly joking when I say that I was friends with him. I only spoke to him by email. And those emails, by the way, have been released by the FBI and Trump. I'm part of the Epstein files. So you can see all of the emails to him. That is literally all that I know about Jeff Epstein.
I'm looking it up.
I'm glad. Okay. So you hadn't met him. That makes it sound a little better. All right, this one from Wally says, "Why bring up Israel out of context and not relative to their enemies? The Arabs don't care about human rights. No freedom of religion. No nothing."
Holy shit, he is in the Epstein files. sorry.
Now I'm looking it up too. Let's see. The question was, why bring up Israel out of context and not relative to their enemies? The Arabs don't care about human rights. No freedom of religion. No nothing.
Yeah, I don't deny this, actually. I agree.
Hitat Safesu says, one of these two has fallen for Operation SIG, S-I-G, and it's not Nick. What's Operation SIG?
Yes, Operation SIG was a disinformation campaign admitted by Ion Pacepa. He was the largest effector of the Soviet Union, and there was others, but he's a big part of it. Disinformation was coined by Joseph Stalin. Anyways, they wanted to attack America, and the way they did that was actually by spreading disinformation about Israel. In fact, just about, not every, but almost every claim that you heard today from JF, and generally the pro-Palestinian side, actually comes from Operation SIG, and it was Yasser Arafat, Mahmoud Abbas were KGB agents, and this isn't speculation, this is actual fact, this actually happened, and they are still utilizing some of that today. But I can go on for hours. It is the thing though. SIG is just it's the Russian word, it's like the shortened version of the Russian word that just means Zionist governments.
You got it. This one from, do appreciate it. Just a few more late comers. Mo the Goat says, isn't using your fellow Palestinians as a shield for any reason barbaric? Also, F you for the nuke comment. Funny that you are more evil than Israel and nobody grapes or kidnapped your family.
Yes, to the first question, yeah, you can say it's barbaric, sure.
Hey, Jane says, great debate, Nick. You provided facts for your arguments. It was fun to watch. Would you have any books for JF to read so he can learn facts about this topic? God bless you and your beautiful wife, Danielle.
I only read my own book, The Revolutionary Phenotype, a warning about the dangers of AI.
That's why I won the debate, because you never read any of the books. I'm just kidding. You know what? I've read anti-Zionist books. I've read Zionist books. I've read neutral books. I've read Konstantin Zarek, who was an extreme anti-Zionist. He's actually the one that coined the term Nakba. and he was actually very anti-Semitic as well, but whatever. He actually said that the Nakba, the catastrophe, the disaster, was not actually this whole 750,000 narrative that didn't even come until much, much later. It was actually the disaster was that the Arabs were not strong enough or fight hard enough, and a lot of them left before even the war came about to their neighborhoods instead of fighting the Jews. And in fact, there's a book called The River Without Bridges written by Dr. Hanim Balakatz. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name. He had a PhD at the University of Michigan. In 1968, they wrote this book, him and somebody else, I don't remember the other name, and they showed that in 1948, those refugees specifically during the Nakba, if you will, they showed that 68% of them admitted that they left before they even saw one Israeli. And so it all plays into some stuff. Some pro-Zionist books, I don't know, Arab-Israeli Wars is pretty good by Chaim Herzog. I.F. Stone is an anti-Zionist, but he was an investigative journalist that wrote a very small book in 1948, and he stopped producing it. It's very hard to find now because the facts were just on Israel's side, and because he was anti-Zionist, he didn't want people to use his own investigative journalist answers to be more Zionist, so he stopped producing it. But you can find it. It's called This Is Israel by I.F. Stone.
This one or near the end here. Lauren Levy says, to JF, why is Jewish sovereignty illegitimate when many states, especially over 50 Islamic states, were formed under similar or more violent conditions?
It's not that the sovereignty itself is illegitimate. You can't claim your sovereignty on the basis of the denial of the sovereignty of others. You have to find a way where your existence does not lead to the abolition of the existence of others.
E says, Epstein, I see why you support Palestine, cough, cough, Aisha, cough.
Yes, so I'm part of the big Jeff Epstein pro-Palestinian conspiracy. I acknowledge.
This one from Mo the Goat says, last comment, they say, Nick, you're amazing. Question to Dr. Sneeko. Define moral and consequences. Thank you. If you want.
The question is mine. Define moral consequences.
Moral and consequences.
Well,
just
morality and ethics in general is just the consideration of how your actions impact others and the deontological valuation of them, whether they respect certain principles or violate them. So what I've argued on the basis of tonight is mostly around treat others the way you would want to be treated, some sense of justice, some sense of truth, some sense of care for the collateral damage. Those are my moral principles that I've invoked.
This one from Hey Mate says, does the doctor believe the 10,000 or more dead in Iran protests?
I think it might be an exaggerated number for the purpose of propaganda. I tend to dismiss propaganda, especially when it comes from the US, and it's definitely subservient to the idea of an invasion or to the idea of a revolution in Iran. I find it extremely suspicious.
Just real quick, just so everyone knows, there was not just doctors, but even government officials in the Islamic regime in Iran that actually admitted that of the hospital records, they found, I believe it was a little bit more, but I'll say 30,000 people, and that they actually ran out of body bags. And those were only the people that were counted that made it to the hospital. The ones that were dead on the spot never actually made it to the hospital. So if you want something that's not US or Israeli propaganda emitted from inside Iran itself, that was in the 30,000 plus range.
I'm suspicious even of sources within Iran because I know there are a lot of pressures from the outside to have foreign influence into Iran. So I don't think that it coming from inside, I don't necessarily trust it for that.
Government official, but okay, I mean, yeah, that's fair. If everything's wrong, then.
I mean, there is such a thing as subversion of societies. We see it in the US. So it can happen in Iran too. Even government agents can be dishonorable toward their own people and their own obligations.
Could be.
With that, we are going to wrap up, folks. Want to remind you, both of our guests are linked in the description box. That includes at the podcast. You can find their guests in the description box below there as well. I want to say a huge thank you. People really enjoyed this debate. There was just a ton of people who were very engaged tonight. So I want to say a huge thank you to both Nick and JF for this epic debate.
I had fun, and I
Thanks
want to
for
thank
having us.
JF as well, and thank you, James, for hosting.
My
Thank you.
pleasure.